Now this video is going to be purely nostalgia. Every moment that we talk about in this video will be from the past. So you guys enjoy, and I hope you guys like Sleepy Sundays because it is back. Yeah, Sleep Sundays. I'm going to be dropping more compilations on this channel because it seems like a lot of you enjoy them. So I'm going to try and do one weekly and clip up a lot of my old stuff so you guys can continue to enjoy the channel. Of course, just leave a like, and that's all that really matters on this channel. I really just want you to get some sleep. Make sure you timestamp the moment when you fell asleep, even though that is quite impossible. That is just a running theme. A season in which Neymar would reach new heights, dominating with Barcelona before making a big money move to PSG that would ultimately change the course of football forever. But before we dive into the 2017/18 season that Neymar had with PSG, we gotta take it back to spring of 2017. It's March 2017 and Neymar Jr is still biding his trade at Barcelona, delivering one of the most jaw-dropping performances in Champions League history during the famous remontada against PSG, a side that Neymar would actually join the following season. Now Barcelona had lost the first leg 4-0, but in the second leg, Neymar almost single-handedly inspired this miraculous 6-1 comeback. A second leg comeback that would see him score 2 late goals in the game. A clinical free kick in like the 88th minute and then a cold-blooded penalty. Then he would also go on to assist Sergio Roberto in like the 95th minute with a peach of a ball into the box. And this movement and goal would send Barcelona through into the next stage of the competition. And this was an announcement to the whole world that Neymar was a guy that could dictate a game even whilst being in the same starting 11 as other superstars. He was going beyond just being Messi's sidekick. He was no longer Robin, he needed to be Batman. Or for the One Piece fans, he was no longer Zoro. You know, he wanted to become Luffy, the main character of this story. As Neymar would transfer from Barcelona to PSG for a world record fee of 222 million euros. With PSG forcing this move by paying his entire buyout clause like it's FIFA career mode. We ain't got time to wait. Negotiations need to get done now. Bring Neymar to this club. He needs to save us. And making this move, Neymar's motives were clear. He wanted to step out of the shadows of Messi. And a lot of people labelled him as egotistical for this move. You know, oh really, you couldn't hold it down at Barcelona and succeed a little bit more, get some more greatness in your career. You really wanted the limelight. And yes, that's what a great player needs to do. They need to carve their own legacy without being at the shackles of someone that is ultimately better. Neymar tried to do that, and this was the path that he was going to go down. And at just 25 years old, at the peak of his powers, it was PSG that snapped him. It would just show the dominance that he displayed at Barcelona, grabbing a goal and an assist against Guingamp in his first game. You know, I actually made a separate video talking about some of the best debuts in football history, and I talked about this performance in a bit more detail. Then after this game for the club, he would make his home debut for PSG in a game against Toulouse. And it was written in the prophecy that Neymar was not going to lose this game. Yeah, because he would grab 2 goals and 2 assists in a 6-2 victory. Yeah, he was making a mockery of this league 2 games in a performance that was so overwhelming he would get a 10 out of 10 rating, including a brilliant solo run finish type of goal and then a clever back heel as an assist in the game too. This looked like it was a sign for things to come, and PSG fans were in awe. And this form would just continue because in that 2017/18 Ligue 1 campaign, Neymar was nothing short of unstoppable for PSG. And this was all despite missing the last few months of the season, with him grabbing 19 goals and 13 assists in just 20 games. And to be specific, that is 32 goal contributions in 20 Ligue 1 games. He just came into the French league and said, yeah, this league is nothing, bro. This is beginner mode on FIFA career mode. I'm making a road to glory right now. I'm playing on PlayStation. This is not a real game. With his goals ranging from solo run finishes, link up plays and free kicks, he was showing it all. And then you also saw him dip into his creative bag, creating for the likes of Cavani up top. Throughout most of the season, he was the creative hub and fulcrum of this side. Whenever PSG were going forward, the ball was going through Neymar. And to just illustrate this dominance even more, picture a game against Dijon where PSG won 8-0. And it was January of 2018 where Neymar would score 4 goals and get 2 assists in the game as well. And I think what made Neymar so unplayable that season is how complete he was going forward, because honestly he could do it all, whether it was taking on his man or dipping into midfield to create from deep within the pitch. He could also finish by himself and take on players with ease. And then you also forget that Neymar was a 1v1 demon. You go 1v1 in a wide area against Neymar and you most likely aren't coming out on top because he has acceleration to get past you. He has the skill to take you on 1v1. He can also cut in and shoot and finish. And then he's also underratedly good in the box. When the ball's coming across the box, Neymar can pop up in positions and put it into the back of the net. We've seen it time and time again throughout his career, and in this first season with PSG, it was all on show. And despite Ligue 1 being Neymar's playground, the Champions League that year was Neymar's proving ground, the place where all eyes were on him whenever he started for PSG in this competition. And again, he would flourish, because this is why PSG bought him, to shine in Europe, to bring them silverware. And Neymar would absolutely deliver in the 2017/18 Champions League group stage, where he was arguably the competition's standout performer. And let's just quickly break down that Champions League journey that he had that year, with match day 1 being a 5-0 victory against Celtic, with Neymar scoring the opening on the night and getting his first European goal for PSG. He later set up another goal before the likes of Cavani and Mbappe joined in, and eventually PSG would leave this game winning 5-0. It was a dream start, and this monster trio looked like they were working together in perfect harmony. And by the next match day, it would get even better, with PSG winning 3-0 against Bayern Munich. With Neymar fit again after a minor knock in a previous game, he was back and balling. And within just 90 seconds of the game, Neymar had dribbled through the Bayern Munich defense before putting it on a plate for Dani Alves. Then in like the 63rd minute, Neymar would score a goal for himself in the game. And again, throughout the game, you would see Neymar creating opportunities for the likes of Mbappe, but mostly Cavani. Neymar ending the game with a goal and an assist before going into match week 3 against Anderlecht and winning 4-0, with Neymar scoring a cheeky free kick goal and then just dominating throughout the 90 minutes. After this match day 3 against Anderlecht, they would go to match week 4 and do it again against the same team, winning 5-0 with Neymar picking up another goal and being unfortunate not to score another free kick. Match day 5 would be home to PSG's peak performance during the group stages in a 7-1 win against Celtic. With the Scottish side actually going 1-0 up in the game, it was time for these PSG players to wake up. And it would be Neymar who would wake up and use his Conqueror's Haki to knock out the entirety of the Celtic lineup, scoring in the 9th minute and then the 22nd minute, turning the game around before later on assisting Cavani, who would score as well. PSG then ran up the score to 7-1 and then broke the record for having the most goals in a Champions League group stage, with 25 at this point in time. And even though in match week 6 he was kept quiet by Bayern Munich in a 3-1 loss, Neymar was marked tightly throughout the game, doubled up on, and they knew that if they stopped Neymar, they would stop PSG. But this game was besides the point, because PSG had already made it through and Neymar at this point in time was the best player in the world. But it was only going to get harder for Neymar to continue this reputation that he had gained, because in the round of 16, PSG would draw Real Madrid. A titanic clash would take place, with Neymar being the center of attention, because this is where he needed to make his mark known, taking on the Real Madrid side head to head without, the likes of Messi in your side. You needed to do it for your own team. with the first leg being on the 14th of February 2018, and Neymar did all that he could, being the creative spark for this PSG side and tormenting Real Madrid's defense. He would come out of this game with 13 successful dribbles, and in the 33rd minute you would see a moment of brilliance take place. A moment of genius. With his back to goal, Neymar would produce a back heel into the path of Adrien Rabiot, and this would ultimately lead to PSG's opener on the night, Rabiot putting the ball in the back of the net after a bit of brilliance from Neymar. It was a bit of improvisation, awareness and flair that Neymar just pulled out of his bag and said, you know what, I'm gonna lay it on a plate for Rabiot to eat up. And again, he would not stop there, providing 3 key passes in the game and just tormenting Real Madrid wherever he could. However, this would just not be enough, because in the game, Real Madrid would win 3-1 and Mr. Inevitable Cristiano Ronaldo would score 2 on the night, with Neymar coming agonizingly close to scoring 1 for himself, but just not getting the goal that they needed. But still, going into a second leg, PSG fans had hope, because they knew that with Neymar's help, if everyone else was on point, PSG could forge a comeback. That's how good Neymar was individually in this game against Real Madrid. It looked like it was just him against Real Madrid. Genuine. But then disaster would strike, because on February 25th of 2018, Neymar would be hit with an injury. In a game against Marseille in the Ligue, Neymar would land awkwardly after a challenge. He had fractured a 5th metatarsal in his right foot and sprained his ankle. And the timing of this could not be worse, with PSG's season hung in the balance with a return leg looming in the distance. And Neymar would be ruled out of this second leg against Real Madrid. He would be out for around 2 or 3 months, and this was a crushing blow, because I and a lot of people know that before this moment, Neymar was at the absolute peak of his career and the peak of his powers, with many people that were watching football during this time thinking and believing that PSG were going to overturn, this deficit that they had gone into a second leg against Real Madrid with. But ultimately they would lose 2-1 without the brilliance of Neymar on the pitch. But despite the heartbreak, PSG would still dominate domestically, completing a domestic treble, but it was bittersweet, ending the season with 28 goals and 16 assists in 30 games in all competitions. And even without a Champions League trophy, or without being fully healthy throughout the entirety of the campaign, the 2017/18 version of Neymar Jr will never be forgotten. And it made absolutely no sense. It made 0 sense, because he was so good, yet won nothing. Nothing of substance, nothing that would put him in Ballon d'Or conversations or best of all time conversations. Yet a lot of us that were watching football week in and week out and watching Neymar week in and week out could tell that this was a guy that was at the peak of football. It was Neymar's performances. He needed a second leg against Real Madrid and a performance that would shatter the hopes of the likes of Ronaldo. But Mr. Inevitable, he don't get injured. Ronaldo don't get injured like that. Messi, they don't really get injured. These are 2 outliers in football that will dominate and did dominate for an entire era. Anyone that tried to get close was just bound by their brilliance. That 2018 Ballon d'Or was won by Luka Modric, and you'd see moments where Neymar had opportunities. He came back, played in the 2018 World Cup, he reached the quarterfinals, he had big moments in that competition, but again didn't reach the stages where you needed him before obviously getting injured. This season will never be forgotten. So today we're talking about player versus player in football. Times in football where one player on one side has gone up directly against another. And I think the first player showdown that we have to talk about, and the one that is probably the most popular right now, is a battle between Cristiano Ronaldo and Zlatan Ibrahimovic that commenced back in 2013. Now during this time, this was written up as the Clash of Titans, with Zlatan going up against Ronaldo, and it would commence in a World Cup qualifying playoff between Sweden and Portugal. And this had all the hype during this time. Like, these were 2 players, and are still 2 players, that have some of the biggest egos in football history. 2 of the most outspoken players that wherever they went crowds followed. They both had contrasting ideologies that were honestly so similar yet so different. Two players that were thriving at the top of their game were going up against each other in a playoff that would decide whether the other nation would be knocked out. Two egos up against it with the ability to put the others in the bin. And in November of 2013, this game would eventually be settled in a second leg that would see high-flying stakes. With the first leg ending 1-0 courtesy of Ronaldo scoring a goal, the second leg would be even more tense. Football fans at the time were looking towards Zlatan for an answer. You just let Ronaldo put you in the grave. But when the second leg commenced, it was like all history had been erased. This was a brand new game. At the start of the match, it was tense and tactical, but eventually the deadlock was broken. And in the second half in particular, the game would come to life, with Ronaldo scoring the first after a swift counter-attack. It was one ball that pierced through the Sweden defence and also midfield. That gave Portugal a 2-0 lead on aggregate after Ronaldo would race through after João Moutinho would put the ball in between the defenders. Seemingly this would be a dagger in Sweden's hope, and Zlatan had been silenced once again. But Zlatan wasn't one to shy away from a battle, and in this game he went toe-to-toe with one of the best. He responded in quick fashion like this game was taking place on a five-a-side pitch, scoring 2 goals in 4 minutes, including a powerful header, then a second goal that we just need to quickly break down. Sweden would get a free kick in a fairly obscure position, but Ibrahimovic would step up and lace the ball as hard as he possibly could into the ground, and it would just fly into the back of the net. A low rocket of a free kick to put Sweden 2-1 up in the game and draw the score to 2-2 on aggregate. And in this moment, it was as if Ibrahimovic had literally said to Ronaldo, you know what, anything you could do, I can do better. You do know that, right? You can do Jogo Benito kick-ups for Nike. Bro, I did the same thing. If you guys remember the Jogo Benito adverts back in the day, there was a specific advert where Ronaldo went up against Zlatan Ibrahimovic in a skills battle. This was foreshadowing. This happened before and it would happen again. Zlatan and Ronaldo's egos were going at each other for years. This was before the Messi and Ronaldo real wars. But despite all of this spiritual pressure that Zlatan was exuding onto the football pitch, Ronaldo took it in his stride, because Ronaldo wasn't even done, not even close. And just as Sweden started to believe, CR7 turned gears, shifting into a supersonic mode that would take him to a different realm. And it was another one of these beautiful transitional passes by Moutinho that would break the lines of the Sweden back line. And in the 77th minute, Ronaldo would run onto this ball. He would slot it home to make it 2-2 and 3-2 on aggregate. But no, he was still not done. And it was another breakaway transition where Ronaldo would just be too much for Sweden to handle. And Ronaldo would beautifully finish it off and complete a hat-trick that would ultimately win the game 4-2 on aggregate. It was a battle between two individuals in this game that represented their nations. And it was bittersweet because a lot of people were seeing this as Zlatan's last chance to make it to a big tournament. But it would be Ronaldo and Portugal that toppled over the Swedish giants and eventually made it to the 2014 World Cup. This was honestly to me like Rocky versus Drago, but the football version, with Rocky being Cristiano and Drago being Ibrahimovic. Because in this tie, they both produced iconic performances and went toe-to-toe against one another. Now, not all great duels in football are about goals, so this next one is going to be about controlling a game. We need to now go back to 2012 to talk about a battle between Andrea Pirlo and Xavi, because these two maestros that would turn football into art forms would go up against each other in Euro 2012. And this matchup would be talked about going into a final because Italy and Spain had already played each other previously in the tournament, with their first encounter coming in the group stages with the game ending 1-1. This draw would showcase both midfielders' quality on a football pitch, but in particular Pirlo would come out on top. Like during 2012, I remember there was compilations of Pirlo just dictating the game from start to finish. And fresh off a masterclass against England in the same tournament, he would dictate the game and grab an assist in the 61st minute, gliding past the likes of Sergio Ramos before sliding the ball through to Di Natale. It was Pirlo at his best, being able to roam freely and also have the ball in deep areas of the pitch, but also drive forwards. But it wasn't like Xavi was quiet. Pirlo was just better in this group stage game, with both players taking turns in orchestrating the teams. With this tactical match ending in a stalemate, these two sides and individuals would meet up again in a final. And the stage was set. This was the sequel that we were all waiting for. We were going to get the popcorn and we were going to start watching Pirlo and Xavi compilations. This was genuinely the meeting of two creative minds, you know, two conductors of football, two guys at the peaks of their creative and controlling careers. Like, genuinely, it's like two scientists going creation for creation. But this time it wouldn't be an Italian that stole the show, because Xavi would turn up with his greasy hair and just take over. He stole the show from the first whistle, I'm telling you. Taking control, pinging passes with Iniesta and becoming the conductor of this orchestra. And for the majority of this game, Pirlo and the Italian midfield and just team were put on the back foot. They couldn't handle the Spanish pressure, possession and flair, including Xavi. Like, it got to the point in this game where Xavi would make a pass and Spanish fans would say ole, because there were so many passes in this game. He dictated the tempo throughout the game and honestly earned his nickname as El Maestro. And it's not like Pirlo didn't try. He attempted to rally his Italians, but he was just suffocated in the process, with Pirlo honestly doing more defensive work than he could in the attacking front. And as Spain ran rampant, it was Xavi that put a defensive splitting path into Jordi Alba, helping Spain to their second goal in the game. And then he would add to his tally of assists by dispossessing Pirlo in the game and then slipping through Fernando Torres. That was Spain's third goal, but Xavi wasn't done yet. He wanted to feed someone else, coming like Marcus Rashford with the free school meals. But ultimately this matchup was special to me because it was one of the first like creative battles I actually looked out for when watching football. And I watched it back again in like 2018 when I was trying to learn how to play football properly. And both of these players are just amazing in every aspect of their game. But Xavi was just on another level in the final of Euro 2012. It was two veterans playing 4D chess in real life, and it was amazing to just see two creative minds just going up against each other. Now, no list of player versus player in football is ever complete without talking about Messi versus Ronaldo. This was a battle that many of us grew up watching, aka the golden era of modern football, because these two players at the pinnacle of their game were not only goats of football, but were also opposing contrasts. Two players that embodied two different things, one being confidence, the other being humility. This was the main storyline each and every time these players went up against each other, and we have to talk about a particular time they dueled and went 1v1. This one commenced in October of 2012 in a game between Real Madrid and Barcelona. And with Barcelona at the top of the table, Real Madrid were chasing them. The Camp Nou was packed with over 90,000 people, and this game was about to be a movie. But after just 23 minutes in the game, the Barcelona fans would be silenced, and it was via a Cristiano Ronaldo goal. A low left-footed shot to the near post of the goal would put Real Madrid up, and honestly, Ronaldo had to take it there. He said, nah, forget your atmosphere. I'm here now, we're rolling and we're gonna score. I am in your territory and will take over your team. It was classic Ronaldo, explosive and clinical, putting Real Madrid up with one of its first opportunities in the game. But just 8 minutes later, it would be Lionel Messi, aka Barcelona's Mr. Inevitable, who would clap back. Pouncing on a defensive miscue, the ball would be in the box and Messi would be there to put it into the back of the net. We take anything. It's 1-1 now and the crowd are chanting Messi, Messi. And this is when that game just ramped up, because in the second half, the tension would just rise. Essentially, the match would divulge into a ping pong battle or a basketball match, with one attack, then another attack, games just going back and forth. But just after the hour mark, it was Messi that produced a moment of magic. After getting fouled and receiving a free kick, Messi would do the unthinkable from 30 yards out, curling a free kick that soared over the wall, dipping in past Casillas. Even by Messi standards, this was something else, a 30-yard free kick. And at this point, you could see Real Madrid players' heads just fall. Is this guy even real, man? What? He really just scored a 30-yard free kick. Come on, man, this ain't fair. But there was one head that remained up during this moment of disbelief. Cristiano Ronaldo. The only man in football. You know what? Whatever you can do, I can match. And just 6 minutes later, after being found by a beautiful ball by Mesut Ozil, Cristiano Ronaldo would make it 2-2, rifling a low shot past Victor Valdez and gesturing to the crowd, Calma, Calma, a celebration that he had done previously. It was 2 goals for Messi and 2 goals for Ronaldo, and honestly, this was peak football during this time. And honestly, this was rivalry at its peak. Not people getting challenged and saying stuff and trying to fight each other after the game. It was goals on a pitch that were answered by goals on a pitch. That's how football should be played. The game would ultimately end 2-2 with the honours going equal ways. And despite Barcelona almost scoring a winner via, I think it was Montoya who hit the bar, it was a fair game. And you could tell Messi and Ronaldo were both itching to get the hat-trick by the 90th minute. But honestly, this was the perfect result because during this moment in their careers, these two were inseparable. Now in February of 2011, Arsenal hosted Barcelona in a Champions League round of 16 first leg. And this would eventually be a game marked in history, being one of the founding memories of a lot of Arsenal fans growing up throughout the 2010s. The match would finish 2-1 and would be an absolute piece of cinematic beauty, including a last minute winner that was scored by Arshavin that would again be written in the history of this club. And of course, some of you may be thinking I'm going to be talking about Jack Wilshere's performance in this game, but no. One player's performance that really stood out to me on the night was Cesc Fabregas's. This was Arsenal's captain at the time and the midfield maestro. And without a goal or an assist in the game, his fingerprints were still all over it. He was one of the sole reasons for Arsenal's comeback in the game, paired alongside a youthful Jack Wilshere. A Jack Wilshere that was 19 at the time and pretty much stole all the headlines after this game, with people talking about how good he was without crediting the maestro behind it all, Cesc Fabregas. And I'm saying this because Fabregas was the one pulling the strings behind it all, allowing the space for Jack Wilshere to exploit. Without Cesc Fabregas in this game, Jack Wilshere wouldn't have got the time of day. Fabregas was the guy that set the tempo from the off, often dropping deep into the Arsenal midfield to orchestrate the attacks even between the Arsenal centre-backs. And then whenever this Arsenal side would surge forward, Fabregas was there at the heart of it. And you'd see these little moments of brilliance that were sprinkled in throughout the game. One, for example, being when Fabregas scooped the ball up for Robin van Persie to volley, with that opportunity forcing Victor Valdez into a save. And as the game went on, Fabregas' influence on it just grew. And eventually his pinnacle moment in the game would come when Arsenal needed him most. With the score being level at 1-1 and Arsenal surging on a counter-attack, the ball would be played to Cesc Fabregas. And within this moment of receiving the ball, turning and looking up, Cesc Fabregas would spot Samir Nasri and play him through with an outside the foot ball. This ball would land perfectly in the path of Samir Nasri, who would get his head up and see the oncoming run of Andre Arshavin. He then plays the ball across, and it's not an easy finish from Andre Arshavin, but he puts it into the back of the net and everyone goes crazy. But without that pass from Fabregas, this moment wouldn't even exist. A perfectly timed and weighted ball in the clutch moments of the game. Fabregas contributed defensively and offensively all game, and honestly this was one of my favourite performances from him during this time. And of course Jack Wilshere was officially named man of the match in this game, but for me, Cesc Fabregas was the man behind it all. And throughout the game you would also see Jack Wilshere take risks. And one thing I want to say is that Jack Wilshere was reassured, because even if he did lose the ball in tight areas, Cesc Fabregas was going to be there to clean up and work things out. Now probably an even better example of a 0 goal and assist game has to come in the Champions League a couple years back now, when Real Madrid took on Bayern Munich. This game would commence in the 2023/24 Champions League campaign, and with Real Madrid taking on Bayern Munich, it would be one man that the world was watching: Vini Jr. This season, Vinicius Jr was on a generational run, and in the second leg of this semi-final, he would show the world why he was up for Ballon d'Or contention. Because despite not scoring or assisting in the game, he was undoubtedly the best player on the pitch. I mean, he completely owned the left side of the pitch. I swear, every time you would see him go up against the likes of Joshua Kimmich or Lima, you know, they were not getting close to him. It was like Vini Jr had this orb around him that wasn't allowing players to get close. Time and time again throughout this game, he would run the flanks, holding the width but also cutting inside to combine with his teammates. This was when this Real Madrid side was built around Vini Jr before the infiltration of Kylian Mbappe. Vini Jr was the star man, and throughout this game you would see his influence just time and time again, with multiple opportunities, him hitting the post at times, driving at defenders, crossing into the box, switches of play to Rodrigo. And one word to perfectly sum up this performance was relentless, because this was a masterclass in direct dribbling ability, constantly attacking down the wing, beating his man every single time, to the point where Bayern Munich had to put 3 guys on Vini Jr in that second half. And it was like every time he received the ball, you were expecting him to do something, whether it was a cross into the box or him cutting in and taking a shot at Manuel Neuer. And over the 90 minutes, you would just see his influence grow and be extended to the rest of his teammates. Because going into this second leg, Real Madrid needed a win. They needed a win to reach the final of the Champions League. And eventually that defining sequence would come, the sequence that would lead to a goal. But remember, this was a goal that Vini Jr wasn't really directly involved in, but he did create. Late on in the game, in like the 88th minute, Vini Jr would be on that left hand side and be causing problems. And on this occasion, he's decided to cut inside and unleash a shot at Manuel Neuer. And this shot could only be parried by Manuel Neuer into the path of Joselu. Joselu would pounce onto the second ball, put the ball into the back of the net, and Real Madrid had just won this game, going on to win 2-1 and sending Real Madrid to a final. And whilst Vini Jr wouldn't be credited with the official assist, everyone knew that this was his game, with 9 attempts on goal, including 5 of them being on target, 3 accurate crosses in the game and several successful take-on. Vini Jr was unreal that game and gave Real Madrid fans a sense of nostalgia to the days of CR7 on that left hand side, with football fans really thinking that Real Madrid had finally replaced the hole on that left hand side, and this was going to be like this for many years. But of course, since that season, Vini Jr hasn't shown them same abilities in the clutch to produce under pressure for Real Madrid in these tight moments. And I think it's because this squad has changed, the manager has changed, there's new additions and superstars. It's just really hard and a really tough time for Vini Jr in this team. But don't forget that in games like this, he can just be unleashed. Now, from a game where Vini Jr directly controlled an entire flank of the pitch to another where Neymar Jr controlled an entire half, we have to talk about Neymar versus Atalanta in the 2019/20 Champions League quarter-final. Now, this was during a time in football where there were no fans in stadiums. A lockdown was taking place and forcing football fans to watch at home. But this didn't stop Neymar Jr from producing one of his all-time best performances without scoring or assisting. This was a one-off season where Champions League ties in the knockout stages were reduced to one game which had to be the difference. And throughout the game, it was like Atalanta were going to upset PSG, because in this game it would just take 30 minutes for Pasalic of Atalanta to get the first goal. But from kickoff, Neymar was just a constant menace, dictating and controlling the game. He frequently was dropping in deep to play like a central defensive midfielder role, picking up the ball deep inside the pitch before bringing it forward, leaving Atalanta's defenders chasing shadows. Neymar would continuously glide past the opposition before creating chances for his teammates or himself. And on one occasion, Neymar just has the ball, nutmegs a man, goes past the couple, drives directly towards the goal and hits a long shot. And despite this long shot not going on target, it was just a sign of more to come. It was Neymar's ability to create something out of nothing that really sparked PSG's inspiration for this game, because it would take PSG until the 90th minute to break the deadlock and equalize and then eventually win the game. But I'm telling you, if you watch this match from start to finish, it was like Neymar was the only PSG player on the pitch, orchestrating attacks from the base of the pitch, completing 16 dribbles in the game. He would also create 4 key chances for his teammates and miss a sitter himself. And Neymar would be involved in the last minute equalizer that Marquinhos would put into the back of the net. And this wasn't, the best contribution, but it was there. Not an official contribution, but something that he was involved in. And then deep into injury time, Neymar would hit a defense splitting pass into the path of Kylian Mbappe, who would then square the ball to Choupo-Moting, who would put the ball into the back of the net and win the game for PSG, sending them into the next round of the Champions League. This was a man of the match display by Neymar, but also, a very much individualistic performance. It was his tireless work throughout the 90 minutes that really inspired his PSG teammates to get their act together and score these goals. Because you can't do all of this in a game and lose 1-0. These PSG players eventually bailed him out and won this game for him. And where Neymar's performances had flaws against Atalanta, we have to talk about another performance in an even bigger stage of the Champions League, that had no flaws. A performance that honestly is the pinnacle of this position that this player plays in. Now this performance would happen in a Champions League final between Chelsea and Manchester City. A game that saw Kai Havertz score the only goal late on in the first half. But it wasn't Kai Havertz's performance that really stood out to Chelsea fans. It was N'Golo Kanté's, because from the outset Kanté just set the tone. He was hurrying the Manchester City midfield all game like a security guard at Superdrug, following the Manchester City players wherever they went. I am watching you. Him partnered with Jorginho would form an excellent pivot in the midfield, and honestly Kanté produced all types of displays in this game. He was making progressive passes, he was up there on that right hand side, he was down making last ditch tackles, he was everywhere. He was able to lock up all Manchester City's midfielders, disrupting moves before they could develop and not letting Manchester City have the time and space to create. With one of my favourite moments in the game being when De Bruyne had the ball. He looks like he's about to look up and produce something, then Kanté comes from nowhere, from behind, and does a slide tackle from behind, gets all of the ball and just moves on with his day.
Thank you.
There's no contention from De Bruyne, he doesn't even look at the ref, it's just I got tackled, I got Kanté'd, and I can't deal with this.
Move this man.
And Kanté did this multiple times in the game, like Mahrez was cutting in from the right hand side and Kanté just comes and stops the move right there. He was saving opportunities before they had even been created. And it wasn't just his defensive contributions, he was able to carry the ball forward and also be reliant in possession. Like constantly you would see the Chelsea players, this youthful team, just give Kanté the ball and Kanté would figure something out. It was him paired alongside Jorginho that were just unstoppable throughout this game and also this Champions League campaign. Because it wasn't just in the final where Kanté was brilliant, it was previous rounds too. And honestly you could say that this entire Champions League campaign Kanté went on a generational run. Kanté would also win 4 aerial duels in the game, which honestly, come on, you look at this brother and you're thinking, yeah, he's gonna climb and start winning headers. No, but he did. With this being the most a Chelsea player has ever won in a final. And another outlier stat in this game that really stood out to me is that he did not commit one foul. He was just perfect in all aspects, and this was a 10 out of 10 display without 0 goals, 0 assists, and the perfect defensive midfielder display in football, including 11 duels won and 10 ball recoveries. This was as complete as a player could get, being able to stop a Manchester City side that was still, peaking. They still had the brilliance of their golden generation. But Kanté was just a one-man wall, a one-man wrecking machine, and put out a 10 out of 10 performance on the table to stop Manchester City and to win Chelsea a Champions League against all odds. So the first guy that we're going to be talking about is Thierry Henry. Because back in 2005 in a game between Arsenal and Wigan, Thierry Henry would execute one of the most aura-filling moments in football history. It was iconic. Let me not say aura-filling because people probably just clicked off the video. The old heads are screaming at me and they're telling me to go bold. This was Thierry Henry during his peak years, and he was exuding confidence in every single game that he entered. And in this game against Wigan, he would be stood over a free kick. It was about 30 yards out against Wigan Athletic. Thierry Henry steps up to take the free kick, and this is when an iconic moment would be produced. And as soon as Thierry Henry placed this ball down to take the free kick, the opposition knew exactly what was going to happen. You see, Thierry Henry was infamous in the league at this point for taking quick free kicks. He'd done it before in previous occasions against the likes of Aston Villa and Chelsea and wanted to catch the keeper off guard. Arsenal had earned this free kick when the score was 2-1 in the game, and Henry had seen the opportunity to take this free kick quickly, but the referee at the time, Graham Poll, was having none of it. Because as soon as Thierry Henry had stood over the ball to take the quick free kick, the referee had gotten over it, standing in front of the ball and halting Thierry from taking a quick free kick. He pretty much said this, Thierry, I don't really think you're going to be doing any of that quick free kick stuff in this game. We've had a bunch of complaints from other teams in the league this season, so just wait to the whistle, and then on your marks, get set, go. And you could just imagine the rage that filled Thierry Henry's blood. He just got rage baited by a referee. Back in 2005, rage baiting wasn't even a word in the Urban Dictionary. So Thierry said, okay, fine, I'll wait. I'm I'm okay with that. I'm not going to get a yellow or a red card in this situation by protesting it. I might just wait. And after a short pause that allowed the Wigan's defence to properly be set up for this free kick to be taken, suspense was building. And while this suspense just built up and built up, the Wigan back line had all been set. But what would follow would be a moment of sheer brilliance, because Thierry Henry would just whip this ball, arcing it over the wall, hitting the post, and it would go into the back of the net. And with the free kick going in and ultimately winning Arsenal the match in a thriller that ended 3-2, Thierry Henry would celebrate by looking at the referee and saying, "Is that enough? Is that enough?" He rage baited the rage baiter by saying, "Was that enough? You know, was that enough?" Giving the referee the look of, "You tried to stop me, but I took my time and I still scored. Is that enough?" Watching this back, you know the exact tone of voice that Thierry said this to the referee in. And this honestly had to be one of the coldest celebrations in football that I've ever seen, because it was almost like an anti-celebration. He just stood there, looked at the referee and said, "Is that enough?" Yeah, because he just put the ball into the back of the net. His teammates are coming over to him and hugging him, and he's looking at the referee dead in his eyes. Henry's goal would put Arsenal 3-1 up before half time, and ultimately Wigan would score one but would not win the game. And this is not the Wigan side that we all knew, you know, the one that got relegated even though they qualified for the Europa League when they won the FA Cup. No, this was a different sort of Wigan that at the time in the league this season were like second place. But from one celebration that required little to no movement to another that made an entire stadium start dancing. Let's talk about Shabalala's celebration in the World Cup back in 2010. And this one's crazy because I remember watching this with my own two eyes. Maybe I reached Unk status already, but this World Cup was probably, I think, one of my first ever World Cups that I properly sat down and watched. It was a World Cup opener in South Africa with the hosts taking on Mexico. So let's set the scene. It's June 11th, 2010, and the World Cup is being hosted in South Africa, with the opening match being held in Johannesburg. And with that came atmosphere, vibes, and vuvuzelas. If you guys remember the vuvuzelas, it was like it's like an instrument that they were just playing it in the crowd for every single game. This was just building up atmosphere, making games more tense than they ever needed to be. And as the vuvuzelas were buzzing like a swarm of bees, we were hearing the likes of Waka Waka by Shakira in the background, alluding to the atmosphere that this was going to be a tournament of a lifetime. And just imagine me and a bunch of you guys that were similar ages, you know, growing up, watching the World Cup, sitting on the sofa after school and watching this thinking, what am I witnessing? This will hold on for the rest of my life. But that experience was topped off by an opening game goal that would include a celebration that I would be recreating on the playground. Because after a nervy first half between South Africa, the hosts, and Mexico, there would finally be a breakthrough. And in the 55th minute, after a bit of transitional counter-attacking play, a South African winger called Shabalala would be through on goal. A South African midfielder by Dikakoi would thread the ball through to Shabalala, breaking the lines of this Mexico defense. And Shabalala would be blazing down that left hand side towards goal in an act of direct winger play. And he would just move within his strides, take one touch inside the box and lace it into the top corner of the goal. And then what would follow would be a celebration that would ultimately become so iconic, because Shabalala and his Bafana teammates would break into a dance similar to a Macarena. And if you don't know what that is, you are way too young to be watching these videos. I don't know what's going on. If you don't know what the Macarena is, oh, okay. They hit that. It felt like the entire stadium was celebrating this goal. I feel bad for the Mexicans on the pitch because they just got swarmed. And the commentary for this goal is also just so iconic. Like, you gotta just go back and listen to that. Obviously, I can't include it in this video, I don't think. If we just play it lightly, maybe, but it was just iconic. Peter Drury just did an amazing job kind of tying this whole moment together with a bit of commentary that honestly created so much more hype for the entire tournament. This was just pure joy and togetherness, and honestly this 2010 World Cup needs to be talked about in a separate video, and I might just do it. Do it for the vibes. Honestly, I might just talk about the entirety of the 2010 World Cup. You guys let me know on Instagram. Don't let me know in the comments. I want the comments to be about the celebrations. And now let's just end the joy. Let's not talk about joy no more. We've done joy. We've done Thierry Henry shushing a referee. But let's talk about an Argentinian smurf. The greatest player of all time. There's no argument about it no more. After seeing a picture of Ronaldo with Donald Trump, we've got him doing Piers Morgan interviews. He's in the sports watching category. So today we celebrate Lionel Messi and a celebration that he executed against Real Madrid and Cristiano Ronaldo. In a game between Barcelona and Real Madrid back in 2017, Lionel Messi would execute a celebration that is still replicated to this day. Doing a celebration in front of 80,000 hostile fans that would just rile them up even more. Again, rage baiting. So let's just quickly talk about this game before we get into the celebration, because it was April 23rd of 2017. Real Madrid versus Barcelona at the Bernabeu, and by stoppage time it was 2-2. With Messi having already looked like he'd gone through multiple battles in this game, getting elbowed, kicked and bleeding from the mouth. But now with the final moments in the game ticking away, it would be Messi that would get his get back, getting his revenge on these Real Madrid fans and then just teasing them once it was complete. Because during this game and in this moment, Barcelona desperately needed to win, especially to keep the La Liga race alive that was ongoing during this time. Casemiro would put Real Madrid ahead in the game, but then Messi would equalize later on, making the game 1-1 before Rakitic would double the score and make it 2-1 to Barcelona. But then James Rodriguez would break the hearts of Barcelona fans by leveling up the score in the 86th minute. And by this time in the game, Real Madrid are down to 10 men, with Sergio Ramos being sent off earlier. And with a draw being enough to hand Real Madrid the title, Messi said, "I'm actually not going to let that happen." And in the 92nd minute of the game, it would be Barcelona that forged a transitional bit of play. One last bit of attack as all these Barcelona players were progressing up the pitch. It would be Jordi Alba that cut the ball back into the path of Lionel Messi. And like he did time and time again during his Barcelona career, Lionel Messi would just ghost into a space on a football pitch where nobody seemed to pick him up. At times it was like Lionel Messi was wearing an invisible cloak to avoid defenders in the box, you know, something like Harry Potter did in the early films. Because no Real Madrid players would be near him, he would ghost into the box and finish off this cutback that Jordi Alba would give to him. 3-2 Barcelona in the depths of the game, and shows them who he is. With the number 10 and his name on the back, it was just a moment of pure rage baiting of the opposing crowd, and also a reminder that Messi can own you on any day of the week. If he's feeling up to scratch, he can do it, and he did it time and time again throughout his Barcelona career, not just to Real Madrid, but to every team under the sun. You know, this is not me highlighting that Messi made fun of Real Madrid, but it's me highlighting that Messi did this to multiple teams, and this was just a reminder that he could have done this celebration multiple times, but you guys annoyed him so much in this game that he really had to pull this one out the bag. It was Messi just telling Real Madrid that you should know my name by now. And you know what, it didn't actually end well for Messi and Barcelona, because despite this game, you know, not winning Real Madrid the La Liga in the game, they would go on to win La Liga. You know, Real Madrid would eventually win La Liga because they had a game in hand after this. But the moment, and this said moment of Messi putting up this top, is the only thing that we ever remember during this season. Like, nobody really remembers Real Madrid winning the league that year, but they did. And I'm pretty sure that in the Spanish Cup that year, Ronaldo would imitate this Messi celebration after he had scored against Barcelona. Editor, you're gonna have to check that up and see if that's right. I don't know. That's just off memory. That's not in the script or anything. And from one moment of rage baiting in a game to another, we have to talk about the infamous Adebayor celebration against Arsenal when he scored after making a move to Manchester City. Now, Adebayor was an Arsenal striker that had a pretty messy exit to the club, but honestly was one of my all-time favourite strikers I had ever seen play for Arsenal and in the Premier League. On his day, he could pull out some of the most flashy finishes that I had ever seen. You know, one of the ones that comes to mind is when he flicked the ball up against Tottenham to himself and volleyed it into the back of the net. But honestly, for his stature, he was pulling out things that you would see from players that were half his height. You know, the technical ability to score some of the goals in his catalogue is outright outrageous. He felt at the time that Arsenal fans and Arsenal themselves had pushed him out of a club that he didn't really want to leave, with a bunch of Arsenal fans accusing him of chasing money by making a move to Manchester City, who had just been taken over by oligarchs. And honestly, there's always two sides to every story. You know, at the time I didn't really hate Adebayor for moving to Manchester City. I was just a bit bitter, but other Arsenal fans that were probably older at the time probably were hating on Adebayor for making such a move. A move to a Manchester City that were constantly on the rise and slowly but surely making their way as one of the giants in English football. It was a weird moment, and by the time Arsenal faced Manchester City, anger had been brewing in Adebayor's heart. But it wasn't just Adebayor's blood that was boiling for no reason, because Arsenal fans were giving him a tough time during a game that Arsenal were away from home at Manchester City, including some very, very disrespectful chants. You know, I'm not going to say it out loud in this video, but some of them were just disrespectful, and that's probably the least of the ones that I'm talking about. And there was stuff including his mum, elephants, you know, all this sort of stuff. It was crazy. And in the 80th minute, Adebayor would finally get the chance to taunt these Arsenal fans back, even though Manchester City were already winning the game. He would thump home a header after a Sean Wright-Phillips cross into the box, scoring a goal that would ultimately seal a 4-2 victory in the game. And if scoring against your old team isn't dramatic enough, Adebayor would take it there. He would take it there. You want to take it there? We can take it there. Yeah? Shout out 6-7. And I'm not talking about 6-7. I'm talking about this 6-7. The drill group. You want to take it there, we can take it there. Adebayor really took it there in this game. He took it there to the Arsenal fans, and he ran halfway across the entirety of the pitch just to celebrate in front of the Arsenal fans. He was a man possessed in this moment. The rage had taken over his body, the chants had got to his head, and he knee slid in front of Arsenal fans that had been abusing him all game. With the Arsenal fans throwing coins at him, you know, they're throwing books at him, bottles, you know, their beer glasses, I don't even know. They were throwing everything at this guy, but he was smirking. And this was after being held back by his Manchester City teammates. They were saying, no, don't do it. Adebayor couldn't care less. He hit them with the "how do you like me now? I just scored against you and you abused me for the entirety of the game, and my team won and your team lost. Hold that." This was a moment that sparked pure uproar, with stewards getting knocked out in the process by Arsenal fans throwing objects. You know, the whole stadium was in uproar. Manchester City fans clashing with Arsenal fans, and just imagine if Adebayor had done this at the Emirates. It would have been even crazier, but in the aftermath it was still breaking loose in the media, with pundits at the time condemning Adebayor for such disrespectful behaviour, and the FA would hand him a hefty £25,000 fine, with also a 2-match suspension taking place just for the celebration alone. You know, that is the peak of this video. We're talking about celebrations in football, and this celebration got Adebayor banned. And honestly, after hearing Adebayor talk about this recently, a couple years back now in an interview, I don't really blame him. You know, getting abuse for like 80 minutes in a game and then scoring, you just want to go and get your get back. And he did that, and it created an iconic moment that people remember as the first thing that they kind of attached to Adebayor in his career, which is actually not a good thing. But I guess you got what you wanted. And now the last celebration that we will talk about in this video. You know, calm your horses. I haven't got all day to do this. So we have the final celebration. Well, I can't talk about a Messi celebration without talking about a Ronaldo celebration, because these are two of my goats. These are two of football goats. And these are two players that we must respect on equal terms. Now, when it comes to confidence, and some would say arrogance, nobody writes a better manual than Cristiano Ronaldo. The man honestly exudes both of these things, and one of his most iconic celebrations also exuded these things, because we've seen Messi hold up his top with his name on the back against 80,000 hostile, you know, Real Madrid supporters, but Ronaldo would do something even worse. triggering Barcelona supporters in a game that he would ultimately win with the final goal. Now let's rewind to April of 2012. Real Madrid and Barcelona are in a heated battle for La Liga during this time, with Barcelona having beaten Real Madrid to the championship 3 years running. So Real Madrid, Ronaldo, Jose Mourinho were desperate to get this back. So essentially this El Clásico at the Camp Nou would be the title decider for the season, in a game that the previous season Real Madrid would lose 5-0. And the match would be intense, with the first goal scorer on the night being Sami Khedira, putting Real Madrid 1-0 up in the game. But in the second half, Alexis Sanchez would come off the bench and tie up the score, grabbing an equaliser in the 70th minute to make it 1-1 in the game. And then the stadium would just explode, because now Barcelona fans had the belief. They thought that Barcelona were going to do it. The tension was riling up. Barcelona fans needed to see their team score, but no. Enter Cristiano Ronaldo and his right hand man, aka Robin at the time, Mesut Ozil. Because just 3 minutes after this Barcelona equaliser, Madrid would launch their own attack, with Mesut Ozil going into his prime playmaker mode and pulling out one of the best passes that I had ever seen. Well, not really, that's a bit of an over dramatization, but it was a brilliant ball. He threads a beautiful through ball through the Barcelona high line that they were playing at the time, which would be followed up by Ronaldo running onto the ball in perfect timing, latching onto this pass by Ozil and putting himself in a 1v1 scenario with Victor Valdés. And with his first touch in this moment, he rounds the keeper, putting himself in an even harder angle to score the goal, but slotting it away perfectly. And at that moment, you could just feel the power shift. And then following up that goal, Ronaldo would execute a celebration that we have all, let's say everyone in the world, has replicated this celebration. You know, some people might not, replicate the Sue celebration. Some people can't jump. They got bad knees, ankles. But this one, I know everyone has done this once in their life. After being booed throughout the entirety of this game, Ronaldo finally had the chance to get his lick back. So after scoring this goal, he would run towards the corner, start to slowly stroll, put his hand down and just gesture that the Barcelona fans need to calm down. He was telling them to chill out. Yeah, calma, calma. You just chill out for a second because I just scored and you need to shush. This was the arrogance, the confidence, all meshed into one celebration that ultimately defined Cristiano during this moment in his career. And with Real Madrid ultimately holding on to this 2-1 result and winning, and then going on to win La Liga, this was the perfect ending for Real Madrid and Ronaldo this season. And that goal was Ronaldo's 42nd in the league that season, and ultimately would help Real Madrid gain 100 points in La Liga. It was a crazy thing to do in this point of time with all the pressure on him, and again, it's something that we always look back on when we associate Ronaldo, celebrations and just El Clásico in general. Now Eric Cantona was the king in his prime. In the mid-90s, the Premier League was ruled by this charismatic Frenchman, and throughout some of his best games he would play an entire 90 minutes with his shirt collar up. Now first of all, this would be extremely uncomfortable. Like, I would not want to play an entire 90-minute game with my shirt collar up. Like, even if my shirt collar was up for more than 2 seconds back in like school days when I used to wear a shirt, because now I'm a chud and I only wear pajamas, I would get annoyed. It would just be uncomfortable. It would like touch my skin and stuff. But this guy was able to play for a full 90 minutes with the collar up. You know, he was representing himself on a football pitch, not just by his skills on the ball, but also his appearance. And like each and every time he put that collar up in a 90-minute game, he would turn into a different beast. And throughout some of his best periods in a Man United kit, he had that collar up. And after making this move from Leeds to Manchester United, he would win 4 Premier League titles in 5 seasons with the Red Devils, cementing his name as a leader in this Manchester United dynasty. They were about to get into that new gen with the likes of Gary Neville, you know, David Beckham, and Cantona was leading the way as, you know, the head honcho, delivering for Manchester United fans when it mattered. From his chip against Sunderland back in December of 1996 to him kung fu kicking a fan, Eric Cantona really showed that his final form wasn't just a representation of his stats, but also who he was. And I think whilst we're talking about a Manchester United legend, there's others that also kind of stem out from this, like Greasy Mullet Ronaldo with the tape on his socks. This was Cristiano Ronaldo's first, Super Saiyan season. This was when this young Portuguese winger was evolving from just this trickster into a goal scorer and a guy that could just penetrate a defense single-handedly. And in the 2007/8 season, he entered the new campaign with, this slick, greasy hair, but also tape around his ankles. This was version 1.0 of his final form. 23 years old, he was stepping out with mercurial vapors. And that season he was simply unstoppable, known as the strongest by many in the league, scoring 42 goals in 49 games for Manchester United, whilst also driving Manchester United to a Champions League and Premier League double. Like, I can make an entirely separate video about this version of Ronaldo itself because it was that good. To the point where there was no debate who the best player in the Premier League was. It was simply Ronaldo. And I think what made him so good during this time is that he gained this ability to just make things happen by himself, picking up the ball in unfamiliar territories on a pitch where he wouldn't really get it, and he would just start running at a defense like his life was on the line. It seemed as if at times there was no tactics to his play. It was just get the ball, turn around, run at this defense and score a goal. And there were multiple successful occasions where he was able to do so. And then you look at his partners in crime up top, and they also had their own final forms. The likes of Skinhead Rooney that we saw, kind of during the 2000s, but eventually when Ronaldo had left the club in the 2009/10 season, Skinhead Rooney would really come to prevail. Because once Ronaldo and his power had left the door, this opened, a new gate of opportunity for Rooney to become the man that everyone knew he already was. He was this bull of a striker that went through this notable physical transformation, going from big to even bigger. Adopting this skinhead look, he was on no nonsense. It did not matter. He was going to war every single game, I swear. This guy must have been wearing AirPods on the pitch. He was listening to drill during games. There is no reason to come out lining up like this. Like, what's going on? He ain't got no clue about football no more. He just wants to break legs. However, he did. He was one of the best players in the Premier League during this time. And during the 2009/10 season, Skinhead Rooney would score 34 goals in all comps, whilst also being voted PFA Player of the Year. And of course they voted for him, because if they didn't, he would headbutt their door open and tell them, why are you not voting for me? Arguably this season was his finest season, and that's just my opinion, but it was also one of the most enjoyable to watch. Like, he would go and slide tackle a defender, get the ball, pick it up, start driving, maybe do a little bit of creative play, but also get on the end of a chance. Like, this version of Rooney just defined his raw, power on a football pitch. And he was showing out in 2010 too, scoring 2 goals against AC Milan, if I remember correctly. Now, of course, Manchester United have a bunch of players that kind of went through final forms themselves, but this next player is magical. Now, in my opinion, no sponsor Ronaldinho is the final form of Ronaldinho. Because in the early to mid 2000s, after making a move to Barcelona, Ronaldinho would see himself donning a kit that had no sponsor on it. And during this period in his career where he would wear this baggy kit where the sleeves went down to his fingertips, he would play some of the best football the world has ever seen. No sponsor Ronaldinho is arguably one of the best final forms in football history, because during this stretch of time in Ronaldinho's career, he was like a sorcerer on the pitch. Arriving at Barcelona in 2003, they were not in the best of times, going through some sort of slump in the club's history. Finishing 6th in La Liga prior to his arrival, he would boost them in all aspects, transforming them into champions and also rekindling the spirit of the Camp Nou. And I think the aesthetic of this era was just unforgettable, tied in to what Ronaldinho was looking like on a football pitch. From 2003 to 2006, Barcelona had no sponsor on their top, and during these years we saw the golden era and golden years of Ronaldinho. From 2004 to 2006, Ronaldinho would win back-to-back FIFA World Player of the Year, and in 2005 he would also win the Ballon d'Or, confirming what everyone already knew just by the eye test. And in that 2005/6 season, he was at the peak of his powers, donning nothing on his chest. No sponsors, getting 26 goals and 24 assists while also helping Barcelona win a Champions League and La Liga. And it's not even these accolades that made this version of himself so good. It was the way in which he, played on a football pitch. You know, a grin whilst taking on defenders. In his debut, he would score a banger. Against Real Madrid in El Clásico, I remember when he was skinning up Ramos, scoring solo run finishes running from nearly the halfway line. Time and time again, when you look back at Ronaldinho's career, especially during this point in time, it's just up there, a peak. He could leave defenders frozen with just a swivel of the hips going one way and then the other. He also made the art of a flip-flap, a skill in which he perfected, to say the least. You also got to think about the culture back then and what ties into this final form. You know, him being, you know, the first, I think, million viewed video on YouTube with a commercial for Nike where he got these new boots, he's hitting the ball against the crossbar. It's just amazing. And that's why, in my opinion, this version of Ronaldinho, nothing comes close in terms of impact on, off the pitch, in terms of what it did for future footballers. This is the pinnacle. And then you also add into the fact that he was mentoring a young Lionel Messi before he eventually left the club. Like Master passing on his powers to the disciple, Gojo, Satoru, Jujutsu Kaisen, giving the keys to Yuta Okkotsu before ultimately being sealed. You know, this is what was going on. Another final form that we have to talk about is World Cup trim R9. Now this was Ronaldo's redemption. You know, R9 coming back from injury and just taking over a tournament, helping Brazil to do it all. Back in 2002, ahead of the World Cup, Ronaldo would, for some reason, cut his hair in the most bizarre way, giving himself a purposely botched haircut that he just wanted to rock throughout the tournament. And my oh my, would this pay off, because ultimately this would become his final form. Not only would this trim become iconic in football history, but also just streets history, with kids getting this to this day. But also, Ronaldo would go on to lead Brazil throughout the tournament, being their top goal scorer, scoring in the decisive moments, the likes of Germany, Ghana, and ultimately he would lift the trophy that nobody sought him to do. He was written off, you know, a season prior with an injury that he got during his club career. But after months of rehabilitation, he was able to make adjustments and made it to the World Cup. It was a miracle at that, but this made it even more special. Essentially, what this haircut did was distract everyone from the fact that this guy was still carrying some sort of injury lingering. And during the 2002 World Cup, he would score a record 8 goals throughout the tournament. And prior to this World Cup, R9 had been the world's best striker during the late 90s, but suffered horrific knee injuries that sidelined him. For almost the entirety of 2000 and 2001, this guy was just completely nowhere to be seen, with many doubting that he would ever be the same, yet he prevailed. The 2002 World Cup, hosted in Korea and Japan, was his redemption arc. A time where a person would reflect on their past before coming into a new light and changing something about themselves. He redeemed himself throughout this tournament. He played like a man on a mission, scoring in Brazil's opener against Turkey with, you know, an iconic toe poke finish. And by the final against Germany, he had collected 6 goals while scoring 2 in the final against Germany, which were both beautiful finishes. The image of Ronaldo during that tournament, you know, the buck tooth and the haircut, are so symbolic with what that tournament became for him. And in my opinion, that was his final form and peak. And another hair related final form is red hair Hair Ljungberg. This might not be well known to a lot of you guys, but Hair Ljungberg was, you know, an Arsenal super sub before the likes of, you know, Martinelli or a Trossard. And in spring of 2002, this super sub would take the next step, you know, making his hair completely red. And this change somehow coincided with a change in form, a final form, helping Arsenal this season to a league title and FA Cup double. And he would actually score 7 goals in the final 8 games of the season. We could also talk about the likes of Gucci headband, Alan Saint-Maximin. This was the final form of a player that we didn't even know had this sort of potential, because when he put on that Gucci headband, not only did he get banned, or I think he got, you know, he wasn't allowed to use the headband, but he just turned into a different beast. It's like he was playing, street football but in the game. Like when St. Maximin was wearing this headband, he was just embodying a free spirit on the pitch. Every time he got the ball, you know, in St. James's Park, fans would just get on their feet. They were cheering him on. It didn't even matter if he got 0 goals, 0 assists. He just needed a good touch, take on a player, get past him and pass it off. But there were times where he was doing his thing, and lately, he's actually doing his thing in football right now. That's why I just kind of wanted to mention it. And starting off in familiar fashion, we actually have to talk about Arsenal in the 2022/23 season. Because this season that football witnessed essentially summed up the art of the bottle, and I don't really want to say that. As someone who has been an Arsenal fan for their entire life, witnessing this season was like a roller coaster of emotion. From the highs of seeing Arsenal play their best football in years, to the lows of not getting over the line when we really needed it. This season, Arsenal fans believed that their long-awaited Premier League title was firmly in their grasp. And despite leading the league for 248 days, in April, they would surrender that lead. If you move, you're in deep trouble. You know, Arsenal got held hostage by Manchester City. But this robbery of a title wasn't a robbery at all. It was a bottling, because Mikel Arteta's side built a commanding lead that season. And by April of 2023, they were like 8 points ahead of Manchester City. This season seemed even more dominant than the one that Arsenal are currently playing in. And this team that Mikel Arteta built looked poised to win their first Premier League title in 19 years. However, in the final weeks of this season, everything unraveled. First of all, this Arsenal side would throw away 2 consecutive 2-0 leads against Liverpool and West Ham. West Ham, bum ham, haram ham. What is going on? I don't understand how we got into these positions where we're winning a game by 2 goals. You know, usually people say that that's the safe score. 2 times consecutively bottled the lead. And with each of these games finishing 2-2, you know, Arsenal had already dropped 4 points from 6. This would then halt the momentum of Arsenal, and then came this bizarre 3-3 draw again, another draw against Southampton. A relegation threatened Southampton just drew to Arsenal 3-3, who are leading the league. And you know what's even worse? Arsenal came from 2-0 down and still draw the game. And these 3 successive draws handed Manchester City the initiative. You know, go ahead, take my lunch money, take everything, take my phone, take my wallet. Why are you giving everything to Manchester City? You just handed it to them on a golden platter, gave them a knife and fork and a napkin, and fed them a first-class meal. And what followed was these Arsenal players going to the Etihad and losing 4-1. Yeah, this was the most humiliating game that I've actually ever watched. I don't want to relive it again, but I had to even write this video. Instantly in the game, it's De Bruyne, you know, powering forward and just slotting the ball into the far right corner. Ramsdale reaching for air. The ball was in the back of the net, and De Bruyne had just showed that even at this age, he was still balling. And from there, this game would just be out of our hands. We would lose control. I swear, it got so embarrassing in this game that at one point, Erling Haaland, you know, lets down his hair. The locks are flowing and scores another one to make it 4. And despite Rob Holding's consolation goal, it would not hide, you know, the shame of Arsenal fans after this game. And by the end of this season, Arsenal had finished 5 points behind this Manchester City side and bottled a lead that almost looked like it was in the palms of their hands. And of course, there were many factors that went into this bottling, like William Saliba's injury, Tomiyasu's injury that actually happened, I think it was in the same game. But at the end of the day, this entire squad capitulated when it mattered most, losing their composure and ultimately proving that they weren't ready to win this title. And as someone that's been watching Arsenal week in and week out this season, there are some comparisons that you can make from that season to this season. You know, drawing with the worst team in the league, a game against Manchester City looming in April. But we'll address this season at the end of the video. Let's get into the next bottle that we have to talk about. Now, Liverpool's 2013/14 campaign remains one of the most dramatic title chokes in English football history. Under manager Brendan Rodgers, Liverpool had assembled this star-studded attack. Suarez, Sterling, Sturridge, Coutinho, Steven Gerrard. And for much of this season, this team was seen as the favourites. With 6 games left in this season, Liverpool had a 5-point cushion at the top of the table. However, on like the 27th of April 2014, Steven Gerrard would make one of the biggest mistakes of his football career. And it wasn't really a mistake, you know, it was a slip at the end of the day. But still, this is, come on. And this infamous slip would ultimately lead to Chelsea winning 2-0 in this game. And what made this even worse is that in a previous game before this, Steven Gerrard had told, you know, the Liverpool squad, we are at the top, we got 5 points at the top. We got the lead, we're not letting this slip.
Oh, hell no.
I think you did let it slip. And at the end of the day, this guy had just written his will. I will slip. Next game against Chelsea and let Demba Ba score and ultimately hand the title to our rivals. Well, not really rivals, but second place Manchester City. They saw this and saw the opportunity. But still, this one loss wasn't enough. Manchester City were in touching distance, but Liverpool still had the lead. You know, let's just calm down, compose ourselves, win the next game. Let's win the next game, guys. Let's win the next game. What happened in the next game?
Someone tell me what happened in the next game.
Yes, in one of the next games, a fortnight later, Liverpool would play Crystal Palace. And this wasn't Crystal Palace with Eberechi Eze. You know, there was no Michael Olise. There was not even Wilfred Zaha. This was a Crystal Palace side that had Marwan Shamak.
He was in the squad.
They had Glenn Murray in striker. You know, Wayne Hennessy as their goalkeeper. Come on, man. Liverpool, what happened? They went to this side's home needing a win to secure the title and did not secure the title. They secured the fumble. And it's even worse than you imagine, because by the 70th minute in this game against Crystal Palace, they were 3-0 up. Yet somehow Crystal Palace, determined to ruin the lives of Liverpool fans, scored. And with 11 minutes remaining, this Crystal Palace side had pulled this score back to 3-3. And one of the main men to thank for this was Dwight Gale. And this 3-3 draw to Crystal Palace would ultimately give Manchester City the edge on them in the title race, helping Manchester City clinch the title and finish above Liverpool. And I guess looking back on it for Liverpool fans, it wasn't all that bad. Their squad got extremely better in the coming years. You know, you'd have the Klopp era after this, and eventually they would win a Champions League and a Premier League title as well. Now next we have to go to a collapse that only happened in the 2024/25 season, but I don't think a lot of people know that this happened, because just last season we saw a generational bottling in the Eredivisie by Ajax. By April 2025 of last year, Ajax was sat at the top of the Dutch league. You know, this is the business end of the season. They were 9 points at the top of this table and 9 points clear of rivals PSV. And with only 5 games remaining, you know, Ajax had to lose 3 of these games to bottle this lead. And with them literally having a 99.3% chance of winning the league that season, even the stats couldn't predict what was about to happen, because somehow they would go 4 games without a win in their last 5, losing 4-0 to mid-table side Utrecht. You know, I don't know if that was a good pronunciation. My pronunciations are bad and my mouth is dry
because I am fasting.
They drew 1-1 to Sparta Rotterdam and lost 3-0 to Nijmegen. I don't know if that's a... what kind of name? Nijmegen. They drew 1-1 to Sparta Rotterdam and lost 3-0 to Nijmegen, dropping crucial points where it mattered the most. And, you know, PSV, they were clawing their way back up, because previously in the title race before this, PSV, you know, they were at the top of the table. And eventually that decisive moment would come. And in Ajax's second to last game of this season, they played Groningen and would draw 2-2. That's 0 wins in 4 games. And going into this last game, they were already behind. PSV would win their game and ultimately pip Ajax to the title. They had clawed back this victory over the likes of a Jordan Henderson of Ajax and a Wout Weghorst. And this season was ultimately humiliating for this Ajax squad. Now next we have to go back to the early 2000s, specifically the 2001/2002 season with Bayer Leverkusen. Now this was long before the term of bottling, but this was a bottle to say the least, because it was not Bayer Leverkusen this season, it was Bayer Leverkusen, because they were never going to win anything. Now this Bayer Leverkusen side was stacked to the brim with talent, the likes of Michael Ballack, you know, Lucio, Zeroberto, they even had a young Berbatov. And by April of 2002, this squad was on course to achieve something amazing. In front of them laid out a treble that they could have potentially achieved, leading the Bundesliga for most of the season whilst also being in the German Cup and the Champions League. However, by the final weeks of this season, every trophy that was within their grasp had been taken away from them. In the league, Leverkusen would finish second on the final day, with their hopes being dashed away from them because of results in the previous rounds. In the German Cup or the DFB Pokal final, they would lose 4-2 to Schalke. And then in the 2002 Champions League final against Real Madrid, they would lose that too, dominating a lot of the second half before ultimately conceding a legendary volley by Zinedine Zidane. And this squad would still achieve a record, to say the least, because they would become the second club in the history of football to finish runner-up in not only a domestic league race, but a domestic cup and also a Champions League. Now, the last evidence of a bottling that happened in football that I'm going to talk about fully in this video came in the 2011/12 season. The Premier League title race included another bottling. This was a title charge led by Manchester United in the 2011/12 season, and it would honestly feature a last day collapse that resulted in one of the best moments in Premier League history. Now, this Sir Alex Ferguson side was still dominant even in 2012, and with 6 games remaining in this Premier League title race, Manchester United held an 8-point lead at the top of the table, a lead that was actually being held over Manchester City. And at this point in the season, most people had given the league to Manchester United. They were about to win their 3rd consecutive title. Yet we were about to witness some absolute cinema, because that April would just be a disaster for this side. First of all, they would blow a 4-2 lead at home to Everton, drawing 4-4 in the game instead. Then they would also suffer a shocking home defeat to Wigan, 1-0 at home. That's crazy. Ultimately, these results that would happen in April would allow Manchester City to close the gap on their rivals. And it would all go down on the last match day on the 13th of May 2012. Going into this last game on the final day of the season, both Manchester clubs, had the same amount of points. And with both games kicking off at the exact same time, Manchester United had dusted off Sunderland, with Wayne Rooney scoring their only goal in the game. But Manchester City's game was still going. And during this game that Manchester City were enthralled in, they were losing 2-1 at one point to QPR. This QPR side filled with misfits were trying to take it to Manchester City. Jamie Mackie would get on the score sheet. Joey Barton would get a red card. But even while 2-1 down and Manchester United fans already celebrating the Premier League that they had won, Manchester City's game was still going. And deep into stoppage time, it only took 2 minutes for this Manchester City side to score 2 goals, with securing Manchester City a 3-2 win against QPR and securing them a Premier League title. They would win the league on goal difference, and ultimately Manchester United had just bottled it, because they could have secured this Premier League title weeks ago. Now, overall, the art of bottling is rife in not only football but sport itself, because there have been many occasions where teams have bottled something, individuals have bottled something, and it's just a reoccurring theme. In all honesty, sometimes it comes down to the DNA of that squad. Do they really have the bottle to get over the line when it's needed? And currently in football right now, in the 2025/26 season, we are putting, Arsenal fans and Arsenal to the test. Can this Arsenal side really take it down to the wire and win their first Premier League title in many years? Because football fans have seen it before and clowned Arsenal fans for, bottling when it really matters. Right now, Arsenal fans have seen their side go from drawing 2-2 to Wolves to winning in a North London derby. A dominant display which saw the likes of Eberechi Eze and also Victor Gyökeres show their brilliance. And with few fixtures remaining for Arsenal and a game against Chelsea, and then that clash against Manchester City in the league as well, can they really win this year? Now, the Nigerian was a quintessential showman during his time. A childhood football star in Nigeria, JJ Okocha would actually win a gold Olympic youth medal in 1996. Okocha was also the captain of Nigeria in the 1994 AFCON, helping the nation to their 2nd ever win of the competition. And after impressing at the likes of Eintracht Frankfurt and Fenerbahce in Europe, Okocha would make a move to Bolton Wanderers. And this is where he really made the streets remember him, because ultimately this term of the streets won't forget stems from British culture. So when Okocha, made his name known at Bolton Wanderers in the Premier League, at 29 years of age, over 4 seasons from 2002 to 2006, this guy was unplayable. I mean, from the outside looking in, every touch that he made was just like a painting on a canvas. Pure entertainment, the ability to flick it past the man or flick it over his head. head. He had this raw pace, power and ability, but he was playing for a side that wasn't, the best in the division. He would produce moment after moment during his time in English football with trademark pirouettes, toe poke finishes, no-look passes, back heels. He was a real showman. And it's not like he had the best of stats. He didn't even have, amazing stats, decent stats. It wasn't really about that. It was about the show that he was putting on in a game. And even in England, he was a BBC African Player of the Year twice. Okocha was a worldwide name before making this move to Bolton Wanderers and eventually playing for the likes of Hull City. He played for the likes of PSG too. But I think what people grasp at when looking at these Streets Won't Forget players is, their statistical impact. Because if the stats show that they weren't really consistent or an outlier during their time, then they won't be associated with just being a household superstar. They will be labeled as a cult hero and a Streets Won't Forget player and eventually be forgotten Streets Won't Forget player. We have to talk about Morten Gamst Pedersen. Now off the bat, you just look at this guy and he is exactly what you picture in your mind when thinking about a player that you almost forgot but you can't forget because of his impact on a pitch. Just like JJ Okocha, you can see his personality just by looking at him. The bleached blonde frosted tips with the tape on his socks. The Norwegian winger would bide his trade at Blackburn Rovers whilst playing in English football. And it was at Blackburn Rovers where he became ultimately a cult hero. In 288 games, he would only score 35 goals, but some of, his brilliance came in them moments. Like some of his free kicks that he would take throughout his time there, or his goal against Fulham back in 2005 that would actually win a Goal of the Month award on Match of the Day. Like when you saw this guy with the blonde hair, the frosted tips, the baggy Blackburn shirt with the long sleeves, you just knew that something brilliant was about to happen visually. He had this inevitability on the ball and especially set pieces, with some of his free kicks looking like a guided missile that would dip into the top corner. And with his left foot ultimately being unstoppable at times, he would be an outlier in this Blackburn Rovers squad. And until 2023, he was Norway's all-time, appearance maker with 83 caps and 17 goals for Norway. He would play at Blackburn from 2004 all the way to 2013. And honestly, it's not like he had this insane longevity throughout his time there. He just had these moments, spotlight moments where Blackburn needed him the most. He would be the one that stepped up, and he was a unique character. And from one player that played at his Streets Won't Forget club for more than 10 years to another that came, saw and conquered. When it comes to Streets Won't Forget players, there is no one like Adel Taarabt. Now, signing out of Lens Academy to move to Tottenham Hotspur, Adel Taarabt already had that potential. He would ignite a cult following through his sheer improvisation on a football pitch. Like, this Moroccan playmaker just had this raw ability, and if I'm being honest, this is just an average Moroccan when playing football. Like, anyone that I've played with in the history of my life that's been Moroccan, even at them, them pickup games, you download Footy Addicts. It's not sponsored, by the way. You pull up to one of these sessions and there's just one guy, Moroccan guy.
Big belly as well.
He's silky on the ball. He will just nutmeg you with ease. And this was Adel Taarabt. He was living an actual footballer career. He made it as though he was playing street football in every single 90 minutes that he appeared in. At Tottenham, he would not make a name for himself and he would eventually become a legend at Queen's Park Rangers. Now, for a lot of you guys watching this video, you might not even know, QPR and their history. One of the original teams that were getting these heavy investments, trying to bring in all these footballers. But before that, Adel Taarabt, he was in there. He was shaking things up and making this team get there to the very top, to the Premier League, where they could get these investments. On loan in the 2010 to 2011 season and then permanently after, Adel Taarabt would, become a baller that nobody could forget. This guy would captain QPR in the 2010/11 season, being 21 years old and given the armband by Neil Warnock. This was to instill the leadership within him to get the best out of him, and it paid off. And this would ultimately result in him getting 19 goals and 16 assists. Honestly, I was there watching some of this, at the time when he was coming up. And it was insane. Some of the stuff that he was doing, he single-handedly led this QPR side to the Premier League, their first time in like 15 years. And it was that responsibility that Neil Warnock gave him by giving him the armband and allowing him to, have this responsibility to not be so reckless in his own half, because he was one of them footballers that would pick up the ball from like the center circle and start dribbling past players like it was a five-a-side game. This is not five-a-side, bro. This is the championship, but he was treating it like Power League.
He was treating it like Power League.
He was honestly an artist on the pitch and dragging his team forward, and it wasn't just his play. Bro, even the look, the long sleeves with the gloves, every single game. And just to quote Neil Warnock, he would say that some of Adel Taarakt's dribbling would be the highlights of his career. You know, the highlights in this guy's managerial career is watching Taarakt dribble. That season, he would win Championship Player of the Year and also be in the PFA Championship Team of the Year as well. This was all at 21 years of age. And you're thinking, this guy is going to go to the moon. With this ability in the championship to lead a side to the very top, imagine if he just sustained this ability. And unfortunately, after this promotion that he gained with QPR, he wouldn't be able to replicate his form in the Premier League. And he would eventually force a move to AC Milan on loan that, again, didn't work out. Later, you would see him play for the likes of Benfica and also make a move to Saudi. But nothing will ever be able to top that season that he had in the championship with QPR. And that's why he is honestly one of, if not the definition for a streets won't forget footballer, because he had this one season of inevitability where every time he got the ball something magic was happening. Now another streets won't forget player that's actually similar in play style to Adel Taarakt is Hatem Ben Arfa, a player that actually did it in the Premier League. Now France's Hatem Ben Arfa was another mercurial dribbler whose peak was brief but electric. Similar to Taarakt, he was a French academy product coming out of Lyon this time. And whilst impressing at the likes of Lyon and also Marseille, he would eventually make a move to the Premier League. And in 2011, his flair would take the stage at Newcastle. This guy would actually glide through defenders at times. He would, phase through them with ease. That's how light he looked when he dribbled on a football pitch. He also only scored worldies. And after an injury kind of hindered his early days at Newcastle, he would return and be even better, lighting up the Premier League with this unrivaled flair. He would just puff out his chest and take on a team. Known for some of his thunderbolt strikes, ability to wriggle out of situations, and that famous solo run goal versus Bolton. A goal that I've actually previously talked about in one of my solo runs in football videos, but this goal, this was my favorite. Honestly, the drive, the power, it was like in a straight line as well. That's what made it so good. And then the finish at the end of it. It was brilliant. And this guy had the ability to do that. And I think what really hindered him and made him, a streets won't forget player is his inconsistency with injuries. He was here and then he was gone. Time and time again, in and out. He would have loan spells at the likes of Hull City and also Nice, which actually saw him score like 17 goals in a campaign back in the 2015/16 season. And it was moments like that that ultimately revived the hope of him becoming a star. Growing up watching Ben Arfa, I would look him up and see photos of him smiling with the likes of Samir Nasri and Karim Benzema, hoping that he would play for a big team like the likes of Samir Nasri for Arsenal, Manchester City, and also Benzema, who played for Real Madrid. And eventually my dreams had been fulfilled because PSG would pick up Ben Arfa back in 2016. But of course, not every story ends in a happy ending, and he was just, not really able to feature as much as we would like him to. Eventually drifting between clubs and not becoming a starter at PSG. You would see him play at Rennes, you would see him play in Turkey, he would even be in Saudi, I think. And he was actually this playmaker that could just step it up and be on this world-class level when he wanted to. But ultimately this level would eventually just disappear and he would become a player that the streets would never forget. Now the next player on this list actually gets spoken about like he's Sasquatch, the Yeti looking thing that Americans still believe that is real. This guy is like a mythical legend because time and time again when I see interviews talking about this player, they describe him like he's a king amongst men. Like this is 2016 LeBron James. I'm gonna take down an entire organization single-handedly. And you guys have probably guessed who I'm referring to. His name is Moussa Dembele. Yes, Dembele. Dembele was a midfield maestro whose mastery of the ball ultimately was his superpower. He became a fan favorite due to his performances and ability to just retain possession. Like he was a big man on the ball but tidy with his feet and able to shield off defenders with ease. He could go box to box with the ball, he could defend the goal, he could score a goal, he could do everything, and honestly he was a creative hub for Tottenham and a security during this time. Moving to England from the Eredivisie via a move to Fulham, this guy would eventually make his way to Tottenham Hotspur. And in 7 seasons, he would make over 250 appearances. And genuinely, what made this guy so special and a Streets Won't Forget player wasn't flashy goals or, GA. It was just his ability with the ball at his feet. Like, you see multiple interviews of people talking about Dembele, the best trainer. Who was the best guy in training sessions? Who was the best guy on the ball? Who was the most technical on the ball? Dembele, Dembele, Dembele. He had the ability to have pressure on his back with defenders coming at him, retain the possession, keep composed, look up, and either dribble himself out of a situation or pass it out himself too. It didn't matter if he was surrounded by opposition, or if he was surrounded by an army, or if he was surrounded with water. He would somehow get out of it with the ball at his feet. He once also had the highest successful dribble rate in the entirety of football. His peak years roughly stemmed from 2014 to 2018 with Tottenham, being a driving force every time he wasn't injured. Internationally, he would make over 80 appearances for Belgium, and he would captain Tottenham at times too. And although he didn't win a Premier League, he didn't win a Champions League, he wasn't there for Tottenham's crazy run as well. He would retire in 2019, but still form a legacy that football fans and Premier League fans will remember forever. Now, another Streets Won't Forget player that I just have to mention is Dimitri Payet. This guy had the streets. He had people replicating free kicks. He was doing it all. I swear, this one, we lived it. We saw it. We loved it. Now, the French midfielder, born in 1987, would actually start his career by playing for a small club on the island of Réunion. Yes, he played on this island. I don't know how people or scouts even got to this island to find him and eventually bring him to the Premier League, but it happened, and we have to thank the one up above that he was brought to the Premier League. He would eventually climb through the French League ranks, playing for the likes of Nantes, Saint-Etienne, Lille, Nice, and eventually he would make his name known at West Ham. During his first 18 months at West Ham, he would dazzle, to say the least, with of course his breathtaking free kicks, but also other iconic finishes and his in-game ability too. And in that 2015-16 season with West Ham, he would register 12 goals and 15 assists in all competitions. And that's while also missing 7 games in the Premier League season. I'm pretty sure he was up for Player of the Year that season too. It was ultimately one of the best peaks in, the Premier League that we've ever seen, from just a random guy came in and just took it over. And what made Dimitri Payet just so good, so unforgettable that season, was his in-game performances too. It didn't just come from these numbers. Like a lot of these players, you just had to be there and watch. And of course, a lot of football fans will remember his free kicks against Crystal Palace. Some of these free kicks were just outrageous. There was one against Manchester United as well. The technical ability that this guy displayed in such a short amount of time for West Ham in this season was off the charts. He was just exuding this confidence that this West Ham squad needed during this time. He would play 60 games for West Ham and then eventually move back to Marseille, where he came from, to West Ham. I think he also had a spell in the Brazilian League. I don't know if that's still going on, but we won't ever forget Dimitri Payet just for his impact that season. Now, there are a bunch of other players that could go in this category of Streets Won't Forget. A Brian Ruiz of Fulham, Yannick Bolasie, oh my days. Okay, Yannick Bolasie first of all. Yannick Bolasie at Crystal Palace. Growing up, all you would see are compilations of Yannick Bolasie, doing this skill. He goes to pretend to pick it up like this, wipes the floor, and then kicks it. He also created his own flick. Running towards the corner flag, you do like a roulette, but also flick the ball up and evade the defender. These were the types of videos and compilations that I grew up with, when watching football and wanting to play. It's insane. Yannick Bolasie at this time was incredible. And then eventually growing up, you find out what a Streets Won't Forget player is, and he's one of them. I even think on one of my old YouTube channels, I have a Yannick Bolasie compilation, like a skills comp. I'll try and find it and, enter it into this video and so you guys can see. If I can't, then I can't. It's a very long time ago. But Yannick Bolasie is also a Streets Won't Forget player. You've got Pape Cisse and Demba Ba as a duo. You've got the likes of Al Habsi, or that entire Wigan squad that Al Habsi played for. A Hugo Rodallega, a Palacios. These guys are all kind of cult heroes for their respective clubs, and people don't forget them. You know, certain people don't forget them. Another one of my favorites is Tuncay, who used to play for Middlesbrough and was a Turkish striker, and I only used to like him because one of my friends was Turkish, and they used to say, you gotta watch Tuncay, man. And from Tuncay at Middlesbrough, I can also talk about Tugay from Blackburn Rovers. You know, if you know, you know. This guy was another one of these ballers that was just scoring worldies. These memories are just coming into my head as I'm making this video. But essentially, why did Streets Won't Forget footballers look like that? It's because they were like that. They looked like that in our heads because these are the memories that are etched with these players, you know, tied into these players that we look back on in their careers, and we associate that time with them. Cole Palmer, once upon a time, carried a Chelsea side. Cole Palmer throughout the 2023-24 season was simply unstoppable, helping Chelsea score 77 league goals in a season that wasn't even their best and is their third all-time highest, you know, scoring season. Throughout this season, this Chelsea side would be up and down, topsy-turvy, with bad results, good results, and throughout this season, the guy that was coming like the emergency services, or like the fireman, was Cole Palmer. Anytime Chelsea called and needed help, Cole Palmer would pick up the phone and run to their rescue. His goals had made up 32.8% of Chelsea's up until that point. That's not just the top scorer, that's a guy that if you deleted him out of this team, you know, Chelsea would be what, 5 positions lower in the table. And I think what made this such a carry job in my eyes is that, you know, it's not like Cole Palmer was pulling out generational numbers when it comes to goals, but when it comes to the big moments in some of these games throughout this season, it was like Chelsea were just saying, give it to Palmer. Time and time again, he would be the guy. He would be the fulcrum throughout this entire attack, the talisman, the guy that was bringing the team forward from defense to attack. He was just roaming about and playing with freedom. And this was before, you know, the next season where they would double up on Cole Palmer. This was before we knew how much of a threat he was. He was getting time, space and possession, and he was capitalizing on it. And again, one of the best things about Palmer during this season is that he didn't look like he could pull off anything that we were seeing from him. This is just some lanky brother talking about chips and curry sauce in interviews, and then he's just pulling up the games and destroying teams. And I think the match that kind of summarizes Palmer during this season is when he single-handedly won Chelsea a game 4-3 against Manchester United, completing a hat-trick, scoring twice in stoppage time, and just, you know, being there at every beck and call. And of course there were some lucky moments throughout this performance against Manchester United, but still, you have to put the ball in the back of the net, and he did it 3 times. And then you had a game against Everton where Palmer would score 4 goals. During this season, he would hit 30 goal contributions whilst just being 21 years old, with 21 goals and 9 assists after this game against Everton. But yeah, I guess because this season was so recent, we've just completely wiped it from our memories. Because Cole Palmer fever was a real thing. You know, everyone was doing this, you know, the Cole celebration, and suddenly all that support that was, you know, for Cole Palmer has diminished, absolutely disappeared, and you know, people are even saying that he might not make it to the World Cup. I don't think that's the case. I think he still has all what it takes to be an amazing player. But I think this Chelsea side is just so bipolar in a sense. But if Cole Palmer was scary, then the next player that we're going to talk about that carried another side nearly to glory is even better. Even scarier. A guy that is actually scary. He might wake you up in the night and bite your shoulder. Yes, we're talking about Luis Suarez. Because 2013/14 Luis Suarez was something else. This was another carry job, but even more, you know, obvious, because some of the things that this guy was pulling off throughout this season were undescribable. Liverpool would finish on 84 points during this season, and despite them not winning the Premier League, Luis Suarez would lead them nearly there to the promised land. And the obvious headline was Luis Suarez scoring 31 goals and grabbing himself the golden boot in the Premier League, whilst also stealing every single individual trophy in the season that you could think of. And this carry job wasn't just those 31 goals, it was everything. Every game that you went into, if Luis Suarez was on your side, you know, and you were one of these Liverpool players, you just felt safe. Not because he wasn't going to bite you because you weren't on the same team as him, but because he was coming at the opposition with vengeance, a ferocious tenacity to just, press the defense, get the ball from the front. He could even, go from front to back, dribbling at the defense. He could do link up play. He could cross it in from the right hand side and get an assist. He could score from every angle. He could score from a free kick. He could score from a volley. He could put the ball through your legs and whip it into the top corner. It did not matter. This was honestly the best version of an all-out striker. An all-out complete forward, an advanced forward, a forward that can do it all. That was Luis Suarez in the 2013/14 season. There was not one thing that he couldn't do. And I think people always mention this, but going into this season, he would, start it by missing a bunch of games because of a ban that he previously had. This is also that same season where he would score like 4 goals against Norwich that had 3 of the best finishes that you will ever see in your entire life, including a 40-yard volley, another goal where he would flick it over a defender and just whip it into the goal on the half volley. There was just too many variations of world-class finishes to even imagine. And this was a striker that was carrying forward the Liverpool side whilst we were in an era where strikers were so prominent. Like, if you took Luis Suarez out of this Liverpool side during this era, they would never have got that far, or that close to winning a Premier League with all of the rest of the players, despite them still having an amazing team during this time. Suarez was just such a level ahead over everyone that it was clear to see, earning that move to Barcelona and just continuing to be a menace in all competitions. That season, the 2013/14 season from Luis Suarez, was the purest form of a forward that I have ever personally witnessed. And for me, that was one of the biggest carry jobs that, again, I have seen. And from one player whose Premier League brilliance earned him a move to Spain to another, we have to talk about Gareth Bale. Because in the 2012/2013 season, Gareth Bale was still biding his trade in North London playing for Tottenham Hotspur. And it was this season where Gareth Bale would just step up, put his backpack on and carry this team forward. Gareth Bale this season had me, an Arsenal fan, at the edge of my seat, tuning into every single Tottenham game, not only because he was an amazing player, but because he was taking over. It was Bale fever. This was Tottenham's former left back turning into a prolific right winger. Suddenly, this guy was in the limelight and was a superstar, scoring 21 goals in 33 games that season. He would contribute to 37.9% of Spurs' attacking output, or their goals, in the Premier League that season. And I think the best characteristic to describe this carry job that Bale, partook in throughout the 2012/2013 season was not the goals that he scored, it was when he scored the goals. Because we all know, you look forwards into his career after this point, he has the clutch gene, whether it's for Real Madrid or Wales. He has just this clutch gene instilled into him, like it was, the serum that they gave Captain America in, the first Captain America movie where they injected him. They gave that soldier serum to Gareth Bale during this season. He was doing utter nonsense, whether it was long range strikes after just striding forward and taking on an entire starting 11, or further developing his finishing from free kicks. There's also statistics out there that say his 21 goals contributed to 24 points for Spurs that season. If that's not a carry job, then I don't know what is. From his late winning goal against West Ham to, multiple goals throughout that season that will just have you with 2 hands over your head saying, what the hell did I just witness? Gareth Bale's season in the 2013 or 2012/2013 season was incredible. And the thing is, Bale's done this multiple times throughout his career. It wasn't just at Tottenham. He carried Tottenham and then left to Real Madrid, and there would be points where he would come up clutch for Real Madrid, but he also had a big impact and kind of carried an entire nation on his back at one point with Wales, taking them far in multiple competitions and breaking records for Wales. And honestly, that run could be talked about in a completely different video, titled about international versions of this, said topic. So you guys let me know if you want me to create that where we talk about carry jobs but in international competitions. But next up, we have to talk about a carry job that was somehow even better than all the ones that we've talked about so far. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Messi in the 2018/19 season. This was Messi somehow at another peak in his career. We'd seen Messi peak multiple times. You've got 100 or or 91 goal seasons. You've got the season where he's just completely ripping apart Manchester United in a Champions League final. You've got multiple Ballon d'Or seasons. You've got him winning the Champions League with MSN. And then you've got 2018/2019 season. That actually sometimes gets overlooked by, the average football fan. But I made a video talking about this season as a whole on my channel, like talking about the 2018/19 season, and this was a part of it. I could have made an entire separate video just about Messi during this season. That's how good he was. Top goal scorer with 36 league goals. Top assister with 13. Most chances created with 92. Most shots in the season too with 171. And finally, the player that won his team the most points that season with 18 points won from Messi's goals. By the way, that's 36 goals and like 13 assists in 34 appearances in the league. Barcelona would score 90 league goals that season. Messi made up how many of them? He would make up roughly 54.4% of Barcelona's goal that season in the league. And that's before we even touched the Champions League record that season too, where he added a further 12 goals to his tally that season. Ridiculous. And there was just multiple occasions throughout this campaign that saw him, do things single-handedly. We must talk about that first leg against Liverpool in the Champions League. A semi-final first leg against Liverpool, this guy was unstoppable in the game. Everything that he did was just perfect. Scoring a free kick that will still go down in history as one of the best free kicks in Champions League history. Like, he was so close to single-handedly carrying this Barcelona side so far in all these competitions. He was just trying to balance too much. And of course, he got hit with that remontada against Liverpool in that second leg. All the Barcelona players, they're crying in the changing rooms. But I think Messi would probably only be the single player that didn't need to let his head down. Messi would average a goal every 78.7 minutes. And honestly, that season, he was just insane. I think if that Barcelona side were just a bit better that season, imagine if they were the Barcelona side of today, they would have won everything, and Messi would have gone down. That would have gone down as a historic season for Lionel Messi, and it's a shame that it kind of got wasted. A season where he was by far the best player in the world. And from a season that goes down in history to one that a lot of people kind of overlook. Alexis Sanchez, once upon a time, carried an Arsenal squad. Yes, back in the 2016/17 season, Alexis Sanchez was biding his trade at Arsenal Football Club. And Sanchez was a key part of Arsenal winning an FA Cup that season and also leading them, in goals in the league. He would play 38 matches, contributing 24 goals and 10 assists, being involved in 34 of Arsenal's 77 goals in the league that season. That is 44.2%. Yeah, that's a carry job. He was involved in everything that season, and if you want to talk about the tenacity of a Suarez, the individual dribbling of a Bale, Alexis Sanchez was like that, just smaller. He was like a honey badger. He was never giving up. He was doing one-man pressing machine, and sometimes it could be a burden towards the side because he would be the only person pressing. He would press like the entire back line of a defense and just get burnt out. But this was, at the time, what Arsenal needed. A guy to just bring them forward during a dark time in their history. And then you just had him coming up in these big moments, like in the FA Cup. Multiple times that season, he would score big goals. And I in particular remember that his fantasy points that season. If you play fantasy football, fantasy Premier League, this guy, I think he had the most fantasy points that season. Yeah, he was going crazy. Another carry job that you could probably talk about is Aubameyang too. I feel like Arsenal is just a team that has consistently got carried by individuals throughout their entire history. You could say Thierry Henry throughout like 2006. You could say Robin van Persie. You could say Alexis Sanchez. You could say Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. People don't want to talk about 2019/20 Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang single-handedly bringing us to another FA Cup and helping us finish a whopping 8th in the Premier League. Let's actually talk about Diego Maradona in the 1986 World Cup in Mexico. Because I couldn't write a video talking about individual runs of form in World Cups without talking about this guy. Growing up, even though I didn't get to witness Maradona, it was talked about like he was some urban myth, a legend amongst the house. From parents to uncles to grandparents, they would all talk about this mythical man named Maradona. And this campaign by him during this World Cup would be one of the first and most memorable and extreme examples of an individual run of form in a World Cup. He was exceptional and honestly creating goals and chances that shouldn't have been allowed, running at defenders and causing them to go into a state of shock. And during this campaign, two of the most iconic World Cup moments would happen that he would be a part of. Of course, the iconic yet infamous Hand of God moment. Jumping in that same game, you would see him go on a solo run of dreams, you know, the type of run you would go on in your actual dreams. You know, you're thinking of doing this on the playground, it doesn't happen, you try, you get tackled, you're finished. Receiving the ball in his own half, Maradona would take on the entire England team and score a goal that would subsequently be voted as the best goal in World Cup history. Both goals that evoke such contrasting emotions done in the same game in a quarter-final. Across the World Cup that year, Maradona would put up 5 goals and 5 assists, helping Argentina lift the World Cup but also being the best individual throughout the entire tournament. And now from the 80s, we got to jump to 1994, where Celine Dion was releasing The Power of Love. But we're not talking about the power of love in this video, we're talking about the power of Romario during the 1994 World Cup. Because over in the US, a World Cup was taking place and Romario was lacing up his boots for Brazil. And this is a generational run of form that honestly doesn't get brought up enough, because Romario is one of the most, conflicting characters in football history. Not a lot of people will mention Romario, especially when bringing up names like Ronaldo and Ronaldinho. Just a few years before their time, it was Romario's time. And me including Romario and Maradona, this is for all the unks out there. The ones that have been watching football since the 1920s. You were truly blessed, because some of the players that you got to witness, wow. You don't make players like these no more. But this campaign by Romario doesn't really get put up there with the likes of Zidane in 98, Messi 2022, Ronaldo 2002. It often gets, left in the shadows. But Romario in the 1994 World Cup helped Brazil, and carried them towards their 4th World Cup title, being the single most important player in the best team in the tournament. For context, going into this tournament, Brazil had been without the World Cup title for 24 years. And for a national team with this much prestige, this was a drought. A time in Brazil's history where they needed a talisman, someone to bring them forward to the center stage. Because gone were the days of Pelé in the 1970s, Jairzinho, Rivelino. They were gone. They were looking for someone new, a hero to rely upon. Kinda like My Hero Academia, after All Might lost, they were looking for their new hero, and Endeavour stepped up. And it's not like since 1970 they had been nowhere near the top. They had moments, being unfortunate in 1982, losing in a penalty shootout in 1986, a humiliating round of 16 exit in 1990, and in 1994, something had to change. And in the season before this World Cup, Romario was biding his trade at Barcelona. The 1993/94 season, he was balling out with the likes of Stoichkov, producing one of the most devastating striker partnerships at the time. So he arrived in the United States in the form of his life. And then he just kept going. This run of form extended from club career into the World Cup, with goals against Russia, goals against Cameroon, and a goal against Netherlands in the quarterfinals. With these impacts perfectly demonstrating the type of striker that he was. And then going from a brilliant quarter-final performance, he would follow it up with a goal against Sweden in the semi-final that would be the goal that helped Brazil win. And he could do all sides of the striker game, whether it was just a simple finish or just an illustrious bit of dribbling masterpiece before putting the ball in the back of the net. He could do it all. And reaching the final, Brazil would have to take on Italy, an Italy side that was headlined by Roberto Baggio, a man that would quote-unquote die standing by the end of this game. With the actual game ending 0-0 and neither Baggio or Romario scoring for either of their sides, the game would go to penalties. And despite the headlines being taken by Roberto Baggio's miss in that final, to get to that final, it was Romario on that Brazilian side that led them all that way. So if Brazil was going to lift the World Cup, the man that could take the credit was Romario. And in a sense, if Brazil had lost, it would have been Baggio that had been gone on this amazing generational run, because he did the same thing but for Italy that year. Romario would win the Golden Ball and by the general consensus be voted as the best player in this tournament. And just 4 years after Romario's run, we head into 1998, a year where Will Smith was releasing Get Jiggy With It. An absolute banger, but just stick to the acting, bro. Just stick to the acting. I, Robot, great film. What else? I Am Legend. That one collaboration he did with KSI. And it was in 1998 where Zinedine Zidane really went on a generational run in a World Cup. And I know it's not, popular to say this. A lot of people like to glaze the 2006 campaign by Zidane. But by that point, this guy was coming out of retirement to play the World Cup. And even though he was amazing throughout that World Cup, it was not on the same level as this year. Because 2006 to a lot of people was the ending for Zidane, going out on a high that eventually turned into a low. From balling out in the knockout stages to nearly knocking out Materazzi in the final with his shiny bald head. 1998, however, was a peak, but it wasn't a peak without some classic Zidane misbehavior, because what a lot of people don't mention is that Zidane would miss, a bunch of games for France in this tournament, receiving a red card in the group stage after a stamp against Saudi Arabia. That action would lead Zidane to miss 2 games in the group stage. And it left this French team in a sense of uncertainty, because the team felt different. They felt like they had been let down by Zidane during this time. But the talent that was still on display without him was still there, the likes of Didier Deschamps, Desailly, Thierry Henry, Thuram. France had genuine quality throughout the entire squad, similar to their squad, right now. But the connector of all of this intelligence throughout the squad was missing, the guy that could change a game by himself. But then after this French team managed to make it to the knockout stages, he returned. Yes, he who shall not be named. Not Voldemort, it was Zidane. He had returned for the knockout stages and he was here to save the day. And the change was immediate and visible, with France looking completely different with the added dynamic of Zidane's bald head being involved. And I don't even think he was bald at this time. A guy that could set the tempo of a game by himself and also just dictate the midfield, he was back. He would come back into the squad as the creative source that all the rest of the team would plug into. And with his help, France would win their knockout ties, winning their semi-final and making it to a final that had the entire nation backing them. And on the other side of the pitch in this final, it would be Brazil as the defending champions trying to stop the French parade. No parties in France, we're taking this trophy and heading back to Brazil for Carnival. And this Brazilian side was even better than the champions of '94 because a new guy on the block was involved in this squad. Ronaldo, who had spent the last 4 years making a name for himself in football, following similar footsteps to Romario. By this point, he was arguably one of the best players in the world. But then on the afternoon of the final, something would happen, with Ronaldo Nazario having a seizure-like episode in the hotel just hours before the final was about to be played. With him being hospitalized and then cleared to play, there would be an entire documentary made about this moment and everything that was going through R9's head during this time. Like, he was put into the team sheet and then left out of it again because of some precautionary issues, but then still played anyway. And it just resulted in this Brazilian team looking disorganized and at a disadvantage to these French players. And despite Zidane not being responsible for this seizure, he would be responsible for seizing the opportunity in this final, scoring 2 headed goals from 2 corners within the first 45 minutes of the game. It was 2 of the same sort of goal that were both finished off by the head of Zidane. A shiny head that would go down to be so iconic because in 2006 he would use that same head to pulverize Materazzi into mid-air. Emmanuel Petit would help the score by making it 3-0, and France had done it. Zidane had been a major part of this tournament and one of the sole reasons that France had made it to the final in the first place, saving them in the knockout stages and also scoring 2 times in the final. Zidane went on a generational run that year, and you can't tell me otherwise. Alright, before we get into this video is brought to you by Oxford Natural Optimum Day and Night. Now listen, I'm not going to stand here and tell you I've been using this for 47 years and it changed my entire bloodline. But this is the good stuff. This is what's helping me go from chud to Chad. And it's not just me that it's been helping, it's other creators within the space and also a couple legends too. With Optimum Day helping with cravings and also energy, and Optimum Night helping with sleep and recovery. And as someone who has previously taken supplements in the past, this has just made my life a whole lot easier. With proven results from a bunch of people in the space, I thought let me help you guys out and just look at the difference between Michael Owen, Ballon d'Or winner and England legend, around £35 lost, and Robbie from AFTV, the Don, lost over £80. So if you want to help yourself get right, make sure you go to oxfordnatural.com/jib, or you can scan the QR code on the screen now and you can get 70% off your first order with Oxford Natural, so don't tell me I don't help you guys. Thank you to Oxford Natural for helping my health, but also helping out the channel. And of course, let's get back into the video. Now, from the late 90s, we are going to jump all the way to 2010, a brand new start for football. It was a new decade and there were some talents that were emerging, but one that wasn't emerging and who was already an established older player that went on a generational run in this World Cup was Diego Forlán. Yes, I am talking about Diego Forlán in the 2010 South Africa World Cup with that Jabulani ball. This was arguably my first ever World Cup, and Diego Forlán was a major part of why this was so iconic. He would arrive in South Africa back in 2010 as arguably Uruguay's best player, in a squad that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw making it all the way to a semi-final. This version of Forlán would win the Golden Ball that year, scoring 5 goals across the competition and putting up solid performances. And here's the main reason why I decided to include Forlán. It's because he was not carrying a team full of equals. He was carrying a team that was mostly full of bums. Forlán was the creative option, he was the goal scorer and also the engine in this attack. And of course there's gonna be people saying Cavani and Luis Suarez and Godin, but going into this tournament, not a lot of, prospects were put upon these players. We didn't really know that they had the capabilities of going this far and helping a Diego Forlán who already was established. Like, the qualification for Uruguay to even get to this World Cup was already the achievement because they had not made it to the 2006 World Cup. But it was Diego Forlán as the elder statesman in this Uruguay side that put his arm around the likes of Luis Suarez and guided him to the top. Because some of Forlán's goals came at crucial points throughout this tournament, like his performance against Germany in the 3rd place playoff. In a match that would ultimately just be crowning the 3rd best nation, this guy would take it seriously and these Uruguay players would die for this nation. And I think his defining moment in this World Cup was his goal against Ghana in the quarter-final. In a quarter-final that saw so much controversy, it was his brilliant strike that actually tipped the nail on the head. Filled with moments of madness, with Luis Suarez handballing the ball and Asamoah Gyan missing the penalty that would be given because of the handball. For me, it was Forlán's strike early in the game that took the moment of this game in an essence. And throughout this entire World Cup tournament, he just had this different sort of ability to manipulate, the Jabulani ball. This was a ball that was controversial at the time, because of the amount of movement that it produced when struck correctly, and Forlán was one of the very few players that loved this ball. When you associate Diego Forlán at this World Cup, you have to put the picture of him but also that ball next to him, because I don't think he plays as well if this ball was different. It was like this ball was his own personal gadget and he just knew all the ins and outs of it. And despite Uruguay finishing 4th that year and not make it to the final, Diego Forlán would win the Golden Ball anyway. In a situation that wasn't the usual, because the Golden Ball isn't usually handed to a player that didn't really make it to the final. They overlooked the likes of Müller, the likes of Messi, Iniesta, and gave it to Diego Forlán. This World Cup in South Africa back in 2010 was not only a brilliant, individual campaign for Forlán, but it was a reformation of a player that was seen as a flop. A player that had rebuilt his career after moving on from Manchester United, spending a bunch of his prime years as a footballer in a club that he wasn't really getting the best out of himself at. It was a generational run filled with feeling of redemption, and that is why I had to include him in this video. And now we have to go to 2018 and talk about Antoine Griezmann, a player that a bunch of you guys have just been screaming at me to talk about throughout my entire time making football videos on YouTube. Now's his time. Because in my opinion, during the 2018 World Cup, he was France's most important player. And that's despite the brilliance of this French national team. They had everyone. But it wasn't Mbappe, it wasn't Kanté, it wasn't Pogba, Matuidi, all these guys. For me, You know, the art of the game, the guy pulling the strings, the creative engine between it all. Griezmann, take a bow. Now, Griezmann in the 2018 World Cup wouldn't win the Golden Ball because it would be given to Luka Modric, who himself had a generational run. But for me, as a guy that actually won the tournament and was a part of the winning squad and was instrumental in their game, in my eyes, would win the Golden Ball. Griezmann would contribute to 3 goals and 2 assists throughout this tournament. But for me, it wasn't just these contributions that made him so good, it was just his elusive way of playing in this French national team. From reassuring this French side early on in the group stage with a penalty against Australia, to his goal in the round of 16 against Argentina. His impact just held different sort of weight and was timed to perfection, being able to complement the play styles of every single player around him. And I know there was a bunch of factors that went into this French team winning the World Cup that year, but for me, Griezmann was like a spider. You know, all the webs were just connecting all the different play in this game throughout every single game, throughout the tournament. He was the one. And I think his generational run isn't one of glitz and glamour, it's one of just consistently being the best, consistently putting his other teammates on, consistently playing his heart out every single game, being like a shadow player. For those who know Kuroko no Basket, you know, the shadow phantom player. That was Griezmann in this side, you know, not one of the main stars, but someone who could take the back seat, but also pull the strings between everyone else. And I think it's really hard to just pin one generational run in this 2018 World Cup because there were so many. There wasn't just one outstanding player. Because of course Luka Modric won the Golden Ball, but also you could talk about Mbappe, you can talk about Pogba, and you can talk about the golden generation of Belgium, the likes of De Bruyne and Eden Hazard. And honestly, at times, they were unplayable. You know, like Belgium versus Japan. If you guys remember that game, I'm actually going to talk about it in a separate video that's already written up, but I just need to record it. So I'm going to just move on to the last generational run that we have to talk about in this video. A generational run that a bunch of you are probably itching for me to talk about eventually. It's Lionel Messi in the 2022 World Cup, Qatar. Now, for a lot of people, this was the most complete individual international tournament in the history of football because Messi scored in every round of the World Cup that year. And in my opinion, I guess, yeah, I agree. This was a perfect campaign. And as someone that has grown into a Messi fan over years of being a Ronaldo one, this was a tournament that I really sat down and just appreciated. This was 10 goal involvements throughout the entire competition, 7 goals and 3 assists. But, you know, there were other unsung heroes in this Argentinian squad that also needed a lot of praise. You know, we were seeing Enzo Fernandez, De Paul, Di Maria, one of my favourite players of all time. He also would win the Golden Ball at the end of the tournament, making him the only player in history to win that award twice. And if you want me to break down this generational run that Messi had, you know, in this tournament, in this World Cup for Argentina, just take everything that I said about all the other players in this list, Romario, Zidane, Maradona, Griezmann, anyone. Take all of the descriptions, mix them all together, and you had Messi in this campaign because he did it all. The numbers, as always, will only capture the surface, and if his numbers were 10 GA throughout this tournament, imagine the surface that that's capturing, because he did a lot. He was not only the creative engine, but he was the captain, he was the leader, he was the man leading out the squad, he was the goal scorer, he was everything about this Argentinian side. He led and uplifted players that were not supposed to be at this level, and it's gone to show because, you know, people came out of that tournament putting 100 million price tags on Enzo Fernandez. This guy is a bum. But Messi, because of his dictatorship in this Argentinian side, raised the levels of those around him, and that's what made this campaign for him as an individual so special. In a similar ilk to Griezmann, you know, and I don't want to disrespect Messi here, but that's kind of what Griezmann did in 2018, lifted the spirits and the levels of everyone around him. Messi did that, but on a different stage, a different level, because some of these Argentinian players that have a World Cup medal now, you know, they're not generational. They're not all-timers. Is McAllister an all-time Argentinian top midfielder? Hell no. But Messi raised their levels and was able to, you know, mold these players into winners. And it was the perfect end to a journey that football fans had seen. From a young Messi participating in 2006, to getting knocked out in the quarter-final against Germany in 2010, making it to the final in 2014 and even winning the Golden Ball, then losing in the round of 16 in 2018 to a French side that would ultimately win the competition. Messi came back and actually won in the final against the same French squad that destroyed him years prior. And this was all at 35 years old. And it's weird because this campaign would start off with Messi and Argentina losing to Saudi Arabia 2-1, with Messi getting the only goal for Argentina in the game. And then Argentina in a must-win against Mexico, and it's Messi that puts the ball into the back of the net. And I think that Mexico game goes, under the radar a little bit, because if they had lost that, there was chance that they would be booted out in the group stage. But Messi scores the goal, they win that game, and then the next game against Poland, Messi does miss a penalty, but they get over the line. Then Argentina go to the round of 16 and it's Messi again helping out against Australia. And then the next round in the quarter-final they would face Netherlands and we would see some peak football. They get over the line in this absolute blockbuster and make it to a semi-final against Croatia. And against Croatia, Messi would score twice. And then Messi and his Argentinian troops, they make it to a final against France. Messi scores twice, Mbappe scores a hat-trick. It's an insane game, and Messi eventually gets over the line because, of the brilliance of his team that he had brought to the very end. He scored in every round, he created in every round, and he was the most important player for Argentina in this tournament. And, that's why I decided to end the Generational Runs in Football World Cup edition with this specific run of form. Now, if you're still awake at this point in the video, then make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe, and comment random stuff like Pepsi Max or Sleepy Sleep. I don't know.